Fantastic.
I
Hooray.
am now recording. We're live on the air. We're not live, but
We're on the internet.
we're 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 coming at you pre-recorded from
On the internet.
from discord.gg.
It's a good, cool website.
Yeah. It's the So we'll be reading James Joyce. Holy flark.
Flark. Yeah, this is going to be Ronnie's first experience with this.
This is my first experience with Joyce in general.
Yeah, exactly.
So it'll be kind of interesting doing this only because I'm gonna have to like describe some stuff probably. Like I just got the just flipped up to the front page here, and
All right.
we got a nice little quote from Ovid, Metamorphoses, on the front. It says a
Oh,
portrait of
yeah,
the
that's
artist as a
that's
young man, and then underneath it says et ignotas animum dimitit in artes. Now I don't know what that means. And it doesn't show a translation, so I'll probably
you
just
should,
I'll just
you should
Google it
probably
right
look it
now.
up.
Yeah, I'll just
You're gonna be doing a lot of that.
All right, that's fine. I'll get ready to learn Google, buddy.
That's that's what these books are for. They're Google teaching instruments.
All I had to do was type et ignotas, and it was like the first thing. So, and it translates to uh let me see, just looking on. I'm getting a couple of different ones from like different websites. That's how translations work. But
You're not wrong.
the I'll just read one. It says, "And he sent forth his spirit among the unknown arts." Awesome.
Uh huh.
I love doing that personally.
I've done that quite a bit myself.
All right. Well,
It is a great joy of mine.
indeed, we love the unknown arts.
It is a
Okay.
righteous cataclysm.
It's right. Something. There's something right about it. To be sure.
Hooray. Okay,
I just
yeah,
realized that I can hear all of your like clicking and typing, and all my clicking and typing is also gonna be coming through. So we might overwhelm people with that. This is an ASMR video, by the way. Okay.
yeah, this is, I don't fucking know.
Joyce ASMR.
True.
Two
True.
internet freaks read you a bedtime story.
True.
All right. So, do you want me to get it started? Are we gonna do? Am I gonna read everything, or are we gonna like take turns reading stuff?
I don't have my copy on me, so I guess it's gonna
Okay.
be.
All right. I'll do everything.
I'm sorry.
We're gonna destroy my voice. My voice
We're
that
gonna
is
shred that shit.
yeah. My voice that is clearly maximally attained to.
Prepared.
Prepared. Yeah, I've never sounded better than this moment. That's a lie, but we move. All right.
This is indeed what happens.
We fucked around too much, so let's get started.
Hmm.
Uh,
Okay, let's
it
do it.
says
Let's do it.
it doesn't say chapter 1, it just says 1, the Roman numeral 1.
Yeah.
Once upon a time, and a very good time it was, there was a moo cow coming down along the road. And this moo cow that was coming down along the road met a nice's little boy named Baby Tucku. His father told him that story. His father looked at him through a glass. He had a hairy face. He was Baby Tucku. The moo cow came down the road where Betty Byrne lived. She sold lemon plat. Oh, the wild rose blossoms on the little green place. He sang that song. That was his song. Oh, the green wove botheth. Okay. when
Good
you,
intro.
yeah, good intro. I already know what's going on. Uh, when you wet the bed first, it is warm. Then it gets cold. His mother put on the oil sheet. That had the queer smell. His mother had a nicer smell than his father. She played on the piano the sailor's hornpipe for him to dance. He danced, and then it has a bunch of tra la 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 sort of bits. But
Mm-hmm.
I'm not gonna do it. Sorry. Tra la 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 la. Just etc. etc. Okay. Uncle Charles and Dante clapped. They were older than his father and mother, but Uncle Charles was older than Dante. Should I be writing this down? I don't.
It's your choice. I don't think it's
I don't.
that
Yeah, I don't think it's that
for
pressing.
this book in particular. I don't think it's that big of an. I don't think it's that big of a deal for this
Right.
one.
Yeah, I can just. Yeah, it's not that pertinent of information to keep on deck.
I like how simple the prose is. It's like it's very misleading.
Mm-hmm. Oh, for sure. Also, are you playing Cookie Clicker? Is that what that all
Yes,
that?
I am. I'm playing Cookie Clicker while we're talking.
That's beautiful. There's something truly sublime about that, I think.
Thank.
All right. Dante had two brushes in her press. The brush with the maroon velvet back was for Michael Davitt, and the brush with the green velvet back was for Parnell. Dante gave him a cashew every time he brought her a piece of tissue paper. The Vances lived in number 7. They had a different father and mother. Well, I would hope so. They were Eileen's father and mother. When they were grown up, he was going to marry Eileen. He hid under the table. His mother said, "Oh, Stephen will apologize." Dante said, "Oh, if not, the eagles will come and pull out his eyes." Pull out his eyes, apologize, apologize, pull out his eyes, apologize, pull out his eyes, pull out his eyes, apologize. This is a gruesome book. Why am I reading this? I should be at the club right
Having
now.
Yeah, you should be listening to house music.
I should be at the club, not reading Joyce. Too bad. The wide playgrounds were swarming with boys. All were shouting, and the prefects urged them on with strong cries. The evening air was pale and chilly, and after every charge and thud of the footballers, the greasy leather orb flew like a heavy bird through the gray light. He kept on the fringe of his line, out of sight of his prefect, out of the reach of the rude feet, feigning to run now and then. He felt his body small and weak amid the throng of players, and his eyes were weak and watery. Rody Kickham was not like that. He would be captain of the third line, all the fellows said. Rody Kickham was a decent fellow, but Nasty Roche was a stink. Rody Kickham had Greaves in his number and a hamper in the refectory. Nasty Roche had big hands. He called the Friday pudding dog in the blanket. And one day he had asked, "What is your name?" Stephen had answered, "Stephen Dedalus." Then Nasty Roche had said, "What kind of name is that?" And when Stephen had not been able to answer Nasty Roche, he had asked, "What is your father?" Stephen had answered, "A gentleman." Then Nasty Roche had asked, "Is he a magistrate?" Should I be doing an accent for... No.
Yeah, don't bother trying to make
No
Irish
accents.
accent good.
Mm-hmm. He crept about from point to point on the fringe of his line, making little runs now and then, but his hands were bluish with cold. He kept his hands in the side pockets of his belted gray suit. That was a belt round his pocket, and belt was also to give a fellow a belt. One day a fellow had said to Cantwell, "I'd give you such a belt in a second." Cantwell had answered, "Go and fight your match. Give Cecil Thunder a belt. I'd like to see you. He'd give you a toe in the rump for yourself." That was not a nice expression. His mother had told him not to speak with the rough boys in the college. Nice mother. The first day in the hall of the castle, when she had said goodbye, she had put up her veil double to her nose to kiss him, and her nose and eyes were red. But he had pretended not to see that she was going to cry. She was a nice mother, but she was not so nice when she cried. And his father had given him 2 5-shilling pieces for pocket money, and his father had told him, if he wanted anything, to write home to him, and, whatever he did, never to peach on a fellow. Then, at the door of the castle, the rector had shaken hands with his father and mother, his soutane fluttering in the breeze, and the car had driven off with his father and mother on it. They had cried to him from the car, waving their hands, "Goodbye, Stephen, goodbye! Goodbye, Stephen, goodbye!" He was caught in the whirl of a scrimmage, and, fearful of the flashing eyes and muddy boots, bent down to look through the legs. The fellows were struggling and groaning, and their legs were rubbing and kicking and stamping. Then Jack Lawton's yellow boots dodged out the ball, and all the other boots and legs ran after. He ran after them a little way and then stopped. It was useless to run on. Soon they would be going home for the holidays. After supper in the study hall, he would change the number pasted up inside his desk from 77 to 76. It would be better to be in the study hall than out there in the cold. The sky was pale and cold, but there were lights in the castle. He wondered from which window Hamilton Rowan had thrown his hat on the ha-ha, and had there been flower beds at that time under the windows. One day when he had been called to the castle, the butler had shown him the marks of the soldiers' slugs in the wood of the door, and had given him a piece of shortbread that the community ate. It was nice and warm to see the lights in the castle. It was like something in a book. Perhaps Leicester Abbey was like that. And there were nice sentences in Dr. Cornwell's spelling book. They were like poetry, but they were only sentences to learn the spelling from. And then there's another little poem thing. It says, Wolsey died in Leicester Abbey, where the abbots buried him. Canker is a disease of plants, cancer one of animals. It would be nice to lie on the hearthrug before the fire. Excuse me. Leaning his head upon his hands, and think on those sentences. He shivered as if he had cold, slimy water next his skin. That was mean of Wells to shoulder him into the square ditch, because he would not swap his little snuff-box for Wells' seasoned hacking chestnut, the conqueror of 40. How cold and slimy the water had been. A fellow had once seen a big rat jump into the scum. Mother was sitting at the fire with Dante, waiting for Bridget to bring in the tea. She had her feet on the fender, and her jewelry slippers were so hot, and they had such a lovely warm smell. Okay, man.
God.
Dante knew a lot of things.
Yeah, this is fucking crazy.
I keep slipping into, you know what the cadence is that I keep slipping into when I'm reading this? It's fucking Don Hertzfeld. You know?
Yeah. Yeah, I hear it.
Yeah.
It's a very simple, like, sentence structure. It's
Yeah.
obviously it's going for like it's like a child speaking, because
Yeah,
it is.
exactly. Yeah.
But
and like the way ideas are connected is very interesting as well. I really like so far like the way that like the football match is described, you know.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm really enjoying this so far. I know I'm only 7 pages in, but still.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so it says Dante knew a lot of things. She had taught him where the Mozambique Channel was, and what was the longest river in America, and what was the name of the highest mountain in the moon. Father Arnold knew more than Dante, because he was a priest, but both his father and Uncle Charles said that Dante was a clever woman, and a well-read woman. And when Dante made that noise after dinner and then put up her hand to her mouth, that was heartburn. A voice cried far out on the playground, "All in!" Then other voices cried from the lower and third lines, "All in! All in!" The players closed around, flushed and muddy, and he went among them, glad to go in. Rody Kickham held the ball by its greasy lace. A fellow asked him to give it one last. but he walked on without even answering the fellow. Simon Moonan told him not to, because the prefect was looking. The fellow turned to Simon Moonan and said, "We all know why you speak. You are McGlade's suck." Suck was a queer word. The fellow called Simon Moonan that name because Simon Moonan used to tie the prefect's false sleeves behind his back, and the prefect used to let on to be angry. But the sound was ugly. Once he had washed his hands in the lavatory of the Wicklow Hotel, and his father pulled the stopper up by the chain and the dirty water went down through the hole in the basin. And when it had all gone down slowly, the hole in the basin had made a sound like that. Suck. Only louder. Yeah, they do tend to do that.
That's crazy.
What? It made a sucking sound when you drained out the drain? That's crazy. I'm fucking crazy.
DSP observation.
How am I
DSP
supposed to
reads
drain
book.
the water without making that sound?
With the bugged drain mechanics.
Welcome to the James Joyce reading where we discuss the coding of the game that they're playing.
The game of football.
the game of the hotel bathroom.
Yeah, but it's also football simultaneously.
True. Yeah, we're playing. Well, no, the football is over. They're going back inside, but he's like remembering something.
Oh, yeah, I know. I'm just
I think this guy's mind
whatever.
wanders a lot. I don't know if you've ever noticed that.
He's just like me.
Any Joyce fans ever noticed that? Man, this guy talks a lot in his head. I mean, me too. But mine is my like internal dialogue usually just sticks to one topic and then runs over it for like a long time. I don't wander around a lot. But anyway.
Yeah, this guy's been on like 20 different topics in the past 7 pages.
Yeah, this is page 8 and we've already covered like a couple songs and well, most of it was the football. But
Right.
yeah. Anywho. To remember that, and the white look of the lavatory made him feel cold and then hot. There were 2 cocks that you turned, and water came out, cold and hot. Yeah, that's how they work in well, it was the United Kingdom at the time, wouldn't it have been?
What?
Yeah, they have two
Yeah, I think
taps.
so.
They have 2 taps over there. It's fucked up. Anyway, he felt cold and then a little hot, and he could see the names printed on the cocks. That was a very queer thing. Can't be saying that, man.
Hey, I mean, this was written
No,
over
I
100
know,
years ago.
I know. I'm fucking around. I know. I'm not an idiot, but like, I love how he just keeps saying stuff is very queer and like, it's like a phrase that he's very like into using, as children tend to have those phrases. I still do because
Hmm.
I speak like a child.
Yeah, every single thing you ever say.
Yeah, it explains
All of the
everything.
Aristotle. Yeah.
Aristotle. Yeah, my Hegelian rants to random people in my DMs. Those are all I could have done those when I was 7, really.
Honestly, no, you couldn't. But I was about to say maybe.
Maybe. No.
Very informative Joyce discussion.
Yeah, we're truly like Renaissance men
And women.
and women. I don't know. I was using man in a very metaphorical term there.
In the general sense. In the way Joyce would have used it.
Yeah, because I don't know if either of us are like could ever be described at any point in our lives as like just men.
Yeah, I'm just a boy.
Yeah, you come a little closer to it than I do, but I don't know.
Yeah,
Is anybody a real man? I think everybody wants to become a real man, and then they don't actually. So they never actually have a moment where they are one. They're always becoming one.
this is
The grind set, you know.
yeah, it's about the grind set. It's not actually the content.
Yeah, it's pure form, no content.
Pretty much.
What are you making over there? Are you making tea?
No, I'm making some more rice.
Ah, rice. Your favorite.
Delicious.
Delicious. All right, I'm gonna get back to the reading.
Yeah, this is a good tangent.
Yeah. And the air in the corridor chilled him too. It was queer and wettish, but soon the gas would be lit, and in burning it made a light noise like a little song. Always the same, and when the fellows stopped talking in the playroom you could hear it. It was the hour for sums. Father Arnold wrote a hard sum on the board and then said, "Now then, who will win? Go ahead, York. Go ahead, Lancaster." Stephen tried his best, but the sum was too hard, and he felt confused. The little silk badge with the white rose on it that was pinned on the breast of his jacket began to flutter. He was no good at sums, but he tried his best so that York might not lose. This could never be me. I would get it right. Father Arnold's face looked very black, but he was not in a wax. He was laughing. Then Jack Lawton cracked his fingers, and Father Arnold looked at his copybook and said, "Right. Bravo, Lancaster. The Red Rose wins. Come on now, York. Forge ahead." Jack Lawton looked over from his side. The little silk badge with the red rose on it looked very rich because he had a blue sailor top on. Stephen felt his own face red too, thinking of all the bets about who would get first place in elements, Jack Lawton or he. Some weeks Jack Lawton got the card for first, and some weeks he got the card for first. His white silk badge fluttered and fluttered as he worked at the next sum and heard Father Arnold's voice. Then all his eagerness passed away, and he felt his face quite cool. He thought his face must be white because it felt so cool. He could not get out the answer for the sum, but it did not matter. White roses and red roses. Those were beautiful colors to think of. And the cards for first place and second place and third place were beautiful colors too, pink and cream and lavender. Lavender and cream and pink roses were beautiful to think of. Perhaps a wild rose might be like those colors, and he remembered the song about the wild rose blossoms in the little green place. But you could not have a green rose. But perhaps somewhere in the world you could. The bell rang, and then the classes began to file out of the rooms and along the corridors towards the refectory. He sat looking at the 2 prints of butter on his plate, but could not eat the damp bread. The tablecloth was damp and limp, but he drank off the hot weak tea which the clumsy scullion, girt with a white apron, poured into his cup. He wondered whether the scullion's apron was damp too, or whether all white things were cold and damp. Nasty Roche and Sorin drank cocoa that their people sent them in tins. They said they could not drink the tea, that it was hogwash. Their fathers were magistrates, the fellows said. All the boys seemed to him very strange. They had all fathers and mothers, and different clothes and voices. He longed to be at home and lay his head on his mother's lap, but he could not. And so he longed for the play and study and prayers to be over and to be in bed. He drank another cup of hot tea, and Fleming said, "What's up? Have you a pain, or what's up with you?" "I don't know," Stephen said. "Sick in your bread-basket," Fleming said, "because your face looks white. It will go away." "Oh, yes," Stephen said. But he was not sick there. He thought that he was sick in his heart, if you could be sick in that place. Fleming was very decent to ask him. He wanted to cry. He leaned his elbows on the table and shut and opened the flaps of his ears. Then he heard the noise of the refectory every time he opened the flaps of his ears. It made a roar like a train at night. And when he closed the flaps, the roar was shut off like a train going into a tunnel. That night at Dalkey, the train had roared like that, and then, when it went into the tunnel, the roar stopped. He closed his eyes and the train went on, roaring and then stopping, roaring again, stopping. It was nice to hear it roar and stop, and then roar out of the tunnel again and then stop. Then the higher line fellows began to come down along the matting in the middle of the refectory. Patty Rath and Jimmy McGee and the Spaniard, who was allowed to smoke cigars, and the little Portuguese who wore the woolly cap. And then the lower line tables and the tables of the third line, and every single fellow had a different way of walking. He sat in a corner of the playroom pretending to watch a game of dominoes, and once or twice he was able to hear for an instant the little song of the gas. The prefect was at the door with some boys, and Simon Moonan was nodding his false sleeves. He was telling them something about Tollebeg. Then he went away from the door, and Wells came over to Stephen and said, "Tell us, Daedalus, do you kiss your mother before you go to bed?" Stephen answered, "I do." Wells turned to the other fellows and said, "Oh, I say, here's a fellow says he kisses his mother every night before he goes to bed." The other fellows, I'm pretty sure this happens in a SpongeBob episode.
They were
This is Grandma's kisses.
Joyce homage in SpongeBob.
Yeah. You can tell how well read I am because my first instinct is to go, SpongeBob.
No, that can't be real. There's no way.
What do you mean?
They couldn't have been referencing fucking Joyce.
No, I feel
That's
like
not
I think
real.
it's a coincidence. Like children are just mean fuckers. That's what it's kind of getting at, I think.
Yeah, that's the point of this book. Everything else is like, it's the meme of the message going over the guy's head.
Right.
Uh,
SpongeBob conditioned us to read James Joyce.
retroactively, yeah. Anyway, oh my god, what the fuck is wrong with me?
Many potential answers to that question.
Chestnut the Conqueror. Okay, I'm looking at a digital copy, so I
Okay,
can't.
okay.
I guess I can. I guess I can trade off.
Fair enough.
But like when your voice is roasted.
Yeah, when my voice shits out. We cuss a lot, don't we? I say
Fucking
fucking shit. Fucking
angry video game nerd review of James Joyce.
ass. MC
Why
Red.
is this language so fucking dense?
I fuck the music. I make it come.
I make it come.
I fuck the music with my serpent tongue.
With my serpent tongue.
Hit.
Hit it. Bow, bow, bow.
I love cursing, dude. It's so fucking fun. Anyway. I could never stop cursing. I'm gonna be saying fuck for the rest of my life.
You're gonna be 98.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna be in the nursing home and the nurse is gonna spill a little bit of my juice and I'm gonna go, "What the fuck?
What the you can't do that.
You can't be
To
doing
me.
that shit." Anyway.
Why didn't Stephen Daedalus just say fuck you?
It would have solved everything. I don't even know what the problem is yet. We're 11 pages in. It might not even be a problem. It might just be him talking about his childhood.
I think that yeah.
I need to stop using pronouns so wildly, because it should be Joyce talking about Stephen's childhood. But they're both he's. Scary. Maybe we should do something about that. Anyway.
Inventing time travel.
Estrogen would have saved her. That's all I'm claiming.
Then in this case, it's just especially funny, but I don't know why.
Alright.
God. Okay.
So yeah, the other fellows stopped their game and turned round, laughing. Stephen blushed under their eyes and said, "I do not." Wells said, "Oh, I say, here's a fellow says he doesn't kiss his mother before he goes to bed." And they all laughed again. Stephen
They're just
tried to
looking at
laugh
me, yeah.
with them. He felt his whole body.
They're just being dicks.
What now?
They're just being dicks.
Oh,
yeah, that's all it is.
They're just being, they're just fucking around. that he felt his whole body hot and confused in a moment. What was the right answer to the question? Oh god, he's just like me. He had given
Oh
two.
no.
He'd given two, and still Wells laughed. But Wells must know the right answer, for he was in third of grammar. He tried to think of Wells's mother, but did not dare to raise his eyes to Wells's face. He didn't like Wells's face. It was Wells who had shouldered him into the square ditch the day before because he would not swap his little snuff box for Wells's seasoned hacking chestnut, the Conqueror of 40. It was a mean thing to do. All the fellows said it was, and how cold and slimy the water had been. And a fellow had once seen a big rat jump plop into the scum. Man, we're kind of burning daylight here. The cold slime of the ditch covered his whole body, and when the bell rang for study and the lines filed out of the playrooms, he felt the cold air of the corridor and staircase inside his clothes. He still tried to think what was the right answer. Was it right to kiss his mother, or wrong to kiss his mother? What did that mean, to kiss? You put your face up like that to say goodnight, and then his mother put her face down? That was to kiss. His mother put her lips on his cheek. Her lips were soft, and they wetted his cheek, and they made a tiny little noise. Kiss. Why did people do that with their two faces? Sitting in the study hall, he opened the lid of his desk and changed the number pasted up inside from 77 to 76. But the Christmas vacation was very far away. But one time it would come, because the earth moved round always. There was a picture of the earth on the first page of his geography, a big ball in the middle of clouds. Fleming had a box of crayons, and one night during free study he had colored the earth green and the clouds maroon. That was like the two brushes in Dante's press, the brush with the green velvet back for Parnell and the brush with the maroon velvet back for Michael David, just in case you forgot. So I guess I don't have to write anything down because she's going to repeat it anyway.
Yeah, he'll say everything over and over and over and over again.
Yep. I'm fine with that, though. It's fun to read. But he had not told Fleming to color them those colors. Fleming had done it himself. He opened the geography to study the lesson, but he could not learn the names of places in America. Still, they were all different places that had those different names. They were all in different countries, and the countries were in continents, and the continents were in the world, and the world was in the universe. He turned to the flyleaf of the geography and read what he had written there. Himself, his name and where he was. Stephen Dedalus, class of elements, Clongoways Wood College. Clongowes Wood College? Salins, County Kildare, Ireland, Europe, the world, the universe. That was in his writing, and Fleming one night for a cod had written on the opposite page, Stephen Dedalus is my name, Ireland is my nation, Clongowes is my dwelling place, and heaven my expectation. He read the verses backwards, but then they were not poetry. Then he read the flyleaf from the bottom to the top till he came to his own name. That was he, and he read down the page again. What was after the universe? Nothing. But was there anything round the universe to show where it stopped before the nothing place began? It could not be a wall, but there could be a thin, thin line there all round everything. It was very big to think about everything and everywhere. Only God could do that. He tried to think what a big thought that must be, but he could think only of God. God was God's name, just as his name was Stephen. Dieu was the French word for God, and that was God's name too, and when anyone prayed to God and said Dieu, then God knew at once that it was a French person that was praying. But though there were different names for God in all the different languages in the world, and God understood what all the people who prayed said in their different languages, still God remained always the same God, and God's real name was God. It made him very tired to think that way. It made him feel his head very big. He turned over the flyleaf and looked wearily at the green round earth in the middle of the maroon clouds. He wondered which was right, to be for the green or for the maroon, because Dante had ripped the green velvet back off the brush that was for Parnell one day with their scissors, and had told him that Parnell was a bad man. He wondered if they were arguing at home about that. That was called politics. There were two sides in it. Dante was on one side, and his father and Mr. Casey were on the other side, but his mother and Uncle Charles were on no side. Every day there was something in the paper about it. It pained him that he did not know well what politics meant, and that he did not know where the universe ended. But God, he really is just like me. Like when I was a kid.
Yeah, yeah.
He felt small and weak. When would he be like the fellows in poetry and rhetoric? They had big voices and big boots, and they studied trigonometry. That was very far away. First came the vacation, and then the next term, and then vacation again, and then again another term, and then again the vacation. It was like a train going in and out of tunnels, and that was like the noise of the
Oh my
boys eating
god.
in the refectory when you opened and closed the flaps of the ears. Term, vacation, tunnel, out, noise, stop. How far away it was. It was better to go to bed to sleep. Only prayers in the chapel and then bed. He shivered and yawned. It would be lovely in bed after the sheets got a bit hot. First they were so cold to get into. He shivered to think how cold they were first, but then they got hot and then he could sleep. It was lovely to be tired. He yawned again. Night prayers and then bed. He shivered and wanted to yawn. It would be lovely in a few minutes. He felt the warm glow creeping up from the cold, shivering sheets, warmer and warmer till he felt warmth all over, ever so warm, and yet he shivered a little, and still wanted to yawn. The bell rang for night prayers, and he filed out of the study hall after the others, and down the staircase and along the corridors to the chapel. The corridors were darkly lit, and the chapel was darkly lit. Soon all would be dark and sleeping. There was cold night air in the chapel, and the marbles were the color the sea was at night. The sea was cold day and night, but it was colder at night. It was cold and dark under the seawall beside his father's home, or house. But the kettle would be on the hob to make punch. The prefect of the chapel prayed above his head, and his memory knew the responses. O Lord, open our lips, and our mouth shall announce thy praise. Incline unto our aid, O God. O Lord, make haste to help us. There was a cold night smell in the chapel, but it was a holy smell. It was not like the smell of the old peasants who knelt at the back of the chapel at Sunday Mass. That was the smell of air and rain and turf and corduroy. But they were very holy peasants. They breathed behind him on his neck and sighed as they prayed. They lived in Clane, a fellow said. There were little cottages there. He had seen a woman standing at the half door of a cottage with a child in her arms, as the cars had come past from Salins. It would be lovely to sleep for one night in that cottage before the fire of smoking turf, in the dark lit by the fire, in the warm dark, breathing the smell of the peasants, air and rain and turf and corduroy. But oh, the road there between the trees was dark. You would be lost in the dark. It made him afraid to think of how it was. He heard the voice of the prefect of the chapel saying the last prayer. He prayed it too against the dark outside under the trees. Visit, we beseech thee, O Lord, this habitation, and drive away from it all the snares of the enemy. May thy holy angels dwell herein to preserve us in peace, and may thy blessing be always upon us through Christ our Lord. Amen. His fingers trembled as he undressed himself in the dormitory. He told his fingers to hurry up. He had to undress and then kneel and say his own prayers and be in bed before the gas was lowered so that he might not go to hell when he died. He rolled his
Whoa.
stockings off and put on his nightshirt quickly, and knelt trembling at his bedside, and repeated his prayers quickly, fearing that the gas would go down. Yeah, you can tell he's Catholic, right?
Yeah.
Like, if I'm not in bed by the time the lights go out, I'm fucked. It's over for eternity.
I didn't go to bed on time.
I'm in a state of mortal sin. What if I die in my sleep? My ass going to purgatory for this one.
This is so fucked up.
Go directly to purgatory. Do not fast go. Anyway.
Just pay the church.
True. I think this is too late for that, though. I don't think they have those anymore.
I mean, yeah, I know. I'm just being facetious.
True. You're a real Protestant trailblazer, aren't you?
Uh-huh.
Yep.
Big fan of, I don't know.
Calvinism?
Yeah, sure, or Anglicanism.
Yeah, you're a Presbyterian now.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
That's accurate.
He felt his shoulders shaking as he murmured, God bless my father and my mother, and spare them to me. God bless my little brothers and sisters, and spare them to me. God bless Dante and Uncle Charles, and spare them to me. He blessed himself, and climbed quickly into bed, and, tucking the end of the nightshirt under his feet, curled himself together under the cold white sheets, shaking and trembling. But he would not go to hell when he died, and the shaking would stop. A voice bade the boys in the dormitory good night. He peered out for an instant over the coverlet and saw the yellow curtains round and before his bed that shut him off on all sides. The light was lowered quietly. The prefect's shoes went away. Where? Down the staircase and along the corridors or to his room at the end. He saw the dark. Was it true about the black dogs that walked there at night with eyes as big as carriage lamps? They said it was the ghost of a murderer. A long shiver of fear flowed over his body. He saw the dark entrance hall of the castle. Old servants in old dress were in the ironing room above the staircase. It was long ago. The old servants were quiet. There was a fire there, but the hall was still dark. A figure came up the staircase from the hall. He wore the white cloak of a marshal. His face was pale and strange. He held his hand pressed to his side. He looked out of strange eyes at the old servants. They looked at him and saw their master's face and cloak, and knew that he had received his death wound. But only the dark was where they looked, only dark, silent air. Their master had received his death wound on the battlefield of Prague, far away over the sea. He was standing on the field. His hand was pressed to his side, his face was pale and strange, and he wore the white cloak of a marshal. Oh, how cold and strange it was to think of that. All the dark was cold and strange. There were pale, strange faces there, great eyes like carriage lamps. They were the ghosts of murderers, the figures of marshals who had received their death wound on battlefields far away over the sea. What did they wish to say that their faces were so strange? Visit, we beseech thee, O Lord, this habitation, and drive away from it all. Going home for the holidays! That would be lovely, the fellows had told him. Getting up on the cars in the early wintry morning outside the door of the castle. The cars were rolling on the gravel. Cheers for the rector! Hooray! 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 The cars drove past the chapel and all caps were raised. They drove merrily along the country roads. The drivers pointed with their whips to Bodenstown. The fellows cheered. They passed the farmhouse of the jolly farmer. Cheer after cheer after cheer. Through Clane they drove, cheering and cheered. The peasant women stood at the half-doors, the men stood here and there. The lovely smell there was in the wintry air. The smell of Clane. Rain and wintry air and turf smouldering, and corduroy. The train was full of fellows. A long, long chocolate train with cream facings. The guards went to and fro, opening, closing, locking, unlocking the doors. They were men in dark blue and silver. They had silvery whistles, and their keys made a quick music. Click, 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 click. And the train raced on over the flatlands and past the hill of Allen. The telegraph poles were passing, passing. The train went on and on. It knew. There were colored lanterns in the hall of his father's house and ropes of green branches. There were holly and ivy round the pier glass, and holly and ivy, green and red, twined round the chandeliers. There were red holly and green ivy round the old portraits on the walls. Holly and ivy for him, and for Christmas. Lovely. All the people. Welcome home, Stephen. Noises of welcome. His mother kissed him. Was that right? His father was a marshal now. Higher than a magistrate. Welcome home, Stephen. Noises. There was a noise of curtain rings running back along the rods, of water being splashed in the basins. There was a noise of rising and dressing and washing in the dormitory, a noise of clapping of hands as the prefect went up and down telling the fellows to look sharp. A pale sunlight showed the yellow curtains drawn back, the tossed beds. His bed was very hot, and his face and body were very hot. He got up and sat on the side of his bed. He was weak. He tried to pull on his stocking. It had a horrid rough feel. The sunlight was queer and cold. Fleming said, "Are you not well?" He did not know, and Fleming said, "Get back into bed. I'll tell McGlade you're not well." "He's sick." "Who is?" "Tell McGlade." "Get back into bed. Is he sick?" A fellow held his arms while he loosened the stocking clinging to his foot and climbed back into the hot bed. He crouched down between the sheets, glad of their tepid glow. He heard the fellows talk among themselves about him as they dressed for Mass. It was a mean thing to do, to shoulder him into the square ditch, they were saying. Then their voices ceased. They had gone. A voice at his bed said, "Daedalus, don't spy on us. Sure you won't?" Wells's face was there. He looked at it and saw that Wells was afraid. I didn't mean to. Sure you won't? His father had told him, whatever he did, never to peach on a fellow. He shook his head and answered no and felt glad. Wells said, I didn't mean to. Honor bright. It was only for cod. I'm sorry. The face and the voice went away. Sorry because he was afraid. Afraid that it was some disease. Canker was a disease of plants and cancer one of animals, or another different. That was a long time ago then, out on the playgrounds in the evening light, creeping from point to point on the fringe of his line, a heavy bird flying low through the grey light. Leicester Abbey lit up. Wolsey died there. The abbots buried him themselves. It was not Wells's face, it was the prefect's. He was not foxing. No, no, he was sick, really. He was not foxing. And he felt the prefect's hand on his forehead. And he felt his forehead warm and damp against the prefect's cold, damp hand. That was the way a rat felt, slimy and damp and cold. Every rat had 2 eyes to look out of, sleek, slimy coats, little feet tucked up to jump, black, shiny eyes to look out of. They could understand how to jump, but the minds of rats could not understand trigonometry. When they were dead, they lay on their sides. Their coats dried then. They were only dead things. The prefect was there again, and it was his voice that was saying that he was to get up. That Father Minister had said he was to get up and dress and go to the infirmary. And while he was dressing himself as quickly as he could, the prefect said, We must pack off to Brother Michael, because we have the collywobbles. Terrible thing to have the collywobbles. How we wobble when we have the collywobbles. He was very decent to say that. That was all to make him laugh, but he could not laugh because his cheeks and lips were all shivery, and then the prefect had to laugh by himself. The prefect cried, Quick march! Hayfoot, Strawfoot! They went together down the staircase and along the corridor and past the bath. As he passed the door, he remembered with a vague fear the warm, turf-colored bog water, the warm, moist air, the noise of plunges, the smell of the towels like medicine. Brother Michael was standing at the door of the infirmary, and from the door of the dark cabinet on his right came a smell like medicine. That came from the bottles on the shelves. The prefect spoke to Brother Michael, and Brother Michael answered and called the prefect sir. He had reddish hair mixed with gray and a queer look. It was queer that he would always be a brother. It was queer, too, that you could not call him sir because he was a brother and had a different kind of look. Was he not holy enough, or why could he not catch up on the others? There were 2 beds in the room, and in one bed there was a fellow, and when they went in he called out, Hello, it's young Daedalus, what's up? The sky is up, Brother Michael said.
Classic joke.
Classic joke. I still get caught with that one. He was a fellow out of the 3rd of grammar, and, while Stephen was undressing, he asked Brother Michael to bring him a round of buttered toast. Ah, do, he said. Butter you up, said Brother Michael. You'll get your walking papers in the morning when the doctor comes. Will I? The fellow said. I'm not well yet. Brother Michael repeated, You'll get your walking papers, I tell you. He bent down to rake the fire. He had a long back like the long back of a tram horse. He shook the poker gravely, and nodded his head at the fellow out of 3rd of grammar. Then Brother Michael went away, and after a while the fellow out of 3rd of grammar turned in towards the wall and fell asleep. That was the infirmary. He was sick then. Had they written home to tell his mother and father? But it would be quicker for one of the priests to go himself to tell them. Or he would write a letter for the priest to bring. Dear mother, I am sick. I want to go home. Please come and take me home. I am in the infirmary. Your fond son, Stephen. How far away they were. There was cold sunlight outside the window. He wondered if he would die. You could die just the same on a sunny day. He might die before his mother came. Then he would have a dead mass in the chapel like the way the fellows had told him it was when Little had died. All the fellows would be at the mass, dressed in black, all with sad faces. Wells, too, would be there, but no fellow would look at him. The rector would be there in a cope of black and gold, and there would be tall yellow candles on the altar and round the catafalque. I don't actually know that word. Jesus. Catafalque. And they would carry the coffin out of the chapel slowly, and he would be buried in the little graveyard of the community off the main avenue of limes. And Wells would be sorry then for what he had done, and the bell would toll slowly. He could hear the tolling. He said over to himself the song that Bridget had taught him. Ding dong, the castle bell. Farewell, my mother. Bury me in the old churchyard beside my eldest brother. My coffin shall be black, 6 angels at my back, 2 to sing and 2 to pray, and 2 to carry my soul away. How beautiful and sad that was. How beautiful the words were when they said, Bury me in the old churchyard. A tremor passed over his body. How sad and how beautiful. He wanted to cry quietly, but not for himself, for the words, so beautiful and sad, like music. The bell, farewell, oh farewell. The cold sunlight was weaker, and Brother Michael was standing at his bedside with a bowl of beef tea. He was glad for his mouth was hot. He was glad, for his mouth was hot and dry. He could hear them playing on the playgrounds, and the day was going on in the college, just as if he were there. Then Brother Michael was going away, and the fellow out of third of grammar told him to be sure and come back and tell him all the news in the paper. He told Stephen that his name was Affy, and that his father kept a lot of racehorses that were spiffing jumpers, and that his father would give a good tip to Brother Michael any time he wanted it, because Brother Michael was very decent, and always told him the news out of the paper they got every day up in the castle. There was every kind of news in the paper, accidents, shipwrecks, sports, and politics. Now it is all about politics in the paper, he said. Do your people talk about that too? Yes, Stephen said. Mine too, he said. Then he thought for a moment and said, You have a queer name, Daedalus, and I have a queer name too, Affy. My name is the name of a town. Your name is like Latin. Then he asked, Are you good at riddles? Stephen answered, Not very good. Then he said, Can you answer me this one? Why is the county Kildare like the leg of a fellow's breeches? Stephen thought what could be the answer, and then said, I give it up. Because there's a thigh in it, he said. Do you see the joke? Affy is the town in the county Kildare, and the thigh is the other thigh. Oh, I see, Stephen said. That's an old riddle, he said. After a moment he said, I say. What? Asked Stephen. You know, he said, you can ask that riddle another way. Can you? Said Stephen. The same riddle, he said. Do you know the other way to ask it? No, said Stephen. Can you not think of the other way? He said. He looked at Stephen over the bedclothes as he spoke. Then he lay back on the pillow and said, There's another way, but I won't tell you what it is. Why did he not tell it? His father, who kept the racehorses, must be a magistrate too, like Soren's father and Nasty Roche's father. He thought of his own father, of how he sang songs while his mother played, and of how he always gave him a shilling when he asked for sixpence. And he felt sorry for him that he was not a magistrate like the other boys' fathers. Then why was he sent to that place with them? But his father had told him that he would be no stranger there because his granduncle had presented an address to the Liberator there 50 years before. You could know the people of that time by their old dress. It seemed to him a solemn time, and he wondered if that was the time when the fellows in Clongowes wore blue coats with brass buttons and yellow waistcoats and caps of rabbit skin and drank beer like grown-up people, and kept greyhounds of their own to course the hares with. He looked at the window and saw that the daylight had grown weaker. There would be cloudy gray light over the playgrounds. There was no noise on the playgrounds. The class must be doing the themes, or perhaps Father Arnold was reading a legend out of the book. It was queer that they had not given him any medicine. Perhaps Brother Michael would bring it back when he came. They said you got stinking stuff to drink when you were in the infirmary, but he felt better now than before. It would be nice getting better slowly. You could get a book then. There was a book in the library about Holland. There were lovely foreign names in it and pictures of strange-looking cities and ships. It made you feel so happy. How pale the light was at the window. But that was nice. The fire rose and fell on the wall. It was like waves. Someone had put coal on, and he heard voices. They were talking. It was the noise of the waves. Or the waves were talking among themselves as they rose and fell.
He really encapsulates the experience of being sick and trying to think very well.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Also, I think, I didn't mention it, but I think that previous sentence at the end of the last paragraph where he says, it made you feel so happy, I think it's the only time so far that we've had sort of the audience or the listener being, like, addressed like that. I don't know if that's true. This is my first time through the book. But I don't know. It stood out to me as like that's not usually how this has gone up to this point in terms of like how it's constructing sentences or whatever.
Right.
Anyway.
It's rare. It's definitely rare, but
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
mm,
He saw the sea of waves, long dark waves rising and falling, dark under the moonless night. A tiny light twinkled at the pier head where the ship was entering, and he saw a multitude of people gathered by the water's edge to see the ship that was entering their harbor. A tall man stood on the deck, looking out towards the flat, dark land, and by the light at the pier head he saw his face, the sorrowful face of Brother Michael. He saw him lift his hand towards the people, and heard him say in a loud voice of sorrow over the waters, "He is dead. We saw him lying upon the catafalque." A wail of sorrow went up from the people. "Parnell! Parnell! He is dead." They fell upon their knees, moaning in sorrow. And he saw Dante in a maroon velvet dress and with a green velvet mantle hanging from her shoulders, walking proudly and silently past the people who knelt by the water's edge. Alright, so that's, I guess, the first kind of section. It's not the end of, like, the chapter. We don't have another, thing there of a Roman numeral, but we get a little break.
yeah, yeah.
I'm gonna,
That was super.
I'm gonna take a drink.
Yeah, I understand.
I'm really enjoying the prose, by the way. Like, holy shit. This
I mean,
is
yeah,
really
it's
fun to
kind
read.
of. I Joyce is considered one of the foremost writers for a reason, and I think it comes down a lot to the way that he just constructs his prose, right? Like he's in a technical sense, probably the single most capable writer that the English language has ever seen.
Oh, yeah. Like, I can understand that. Like, at least in terms of prose. Because, you know, you could argue Milton. But, or at least I would argue Milton. I'm just a Paradise Lost fan.
Yeah, fair enough. But I'm saying
But yeah,
more.
in terms of prose, yeah, this is really excellent stuff.
You can see how it rubbed off on me.
Oh, yeah, no, for sure. Excuse me. That's from the water I just drank. Yeah, I mean, I'm having a lot of fun with this book, and
You know, we're only a little brief little section in, so
yeah, you know, it's what 20 page 25 that we're on.
yeah.
Out of, let me quickly, like 277. So about almost a tenth of the way through the book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's much more brief, I'd say. Like with Ulysses, you have to very slowly process it, but and this is a book that if you read it several times, it rewards you more and more, I'd
Oh
say.
yeah, I
But
can definitely understand that.
with Ulysses, it's kind of a stop and go sort of thing where you have to like process it in small chunks.
I get you. In Finnegan's Wake, you don't even try.
Yeah, I mean, you have to you have to like strike a balance because on one hand, if you take it completely seriously, you're going to miss all of the comedy of it, and
Right.
then on the other, if you don't take it seriously at all, then you'll miss all of the extremely like intricate design. It's extremely highbrow humor is the point.
Mm-hmm. Well, I can't wait to get to it, but right now, we're doing this right now.
It's a good intro.
Yeah, I mean, I'm also just enjoying it on its own merits. Like, it's really good. I'm really
Yeah, that's what this is like the weakest of the trilogy, but it's still an excellent work. You
Mm-hmm.
know.
Yeah, this is still like just from what I've read so far. Obviously, I can't really give it a ranking until I'm done with the book, but probably until I'm done with it the second time, for real. But I don't know. This is probably like an 8 or 9 out of 10 for me so far. Probably an 8. Like in terms of just how much I'm enjoying reading it.
Yeah.
Like I feel like I could binge read 100 pages of this in like one sitting very comfortably.
Uh
Maybe not if I was reading it all out loud, but
huh.
you know what I mean.
That's perfectly understand. I mean, yeah, I don't want to exhaust you like that.
hmm
So
I don't know how long the like sections or chapters or whatever are. There was the table of contents didn't break it down any further than just the book, probably because it's not
in
that
copy,
long.
yeah. I mean, in the version that I have here, it's separated into chapters. So
Okay. How many chapters does it have?
um, it's been a while. There's no table of contents in this one,
Okay.
but I'm sure it's on the Wikipedia article.
hmm
Portrait James Joyce, Wikipedia. No, it doesn't have. Damn it. That's all right.
So I don't know when
Oh,
when like what for like what a stopping point for us would be, but I mean I want to keep
I
going for
guess.
right now. Obviously, I'm not even close to
Yeah,
done, but uh yeah, I don't know in terms of like planning when to stop. I guess I'll just try and let it come up naturally.
that's about what I had in mind too.
Yeah. All right. Let's get back into it. Bottom of page 25, at least on my Penguin Classics edition of Portrait.
Oh, it just has 5 chapters.
Okay. Makes sense. It wouldn't be particularly long. So, you know,
Yeah, we're not out of the woods yet with this one.
all right. But it's not like
It's
Moby Dick
separated.
chapters where like the Moby Dick chapters are like 5 pages.
Yeah, yeah, no, these are extremely long.
Yeah.
Like the Nowhere and Forever chapters, except I think they're even longer.
Right, right, right. Well, Nowhere and Forever is very specialized in terms of what it's trying to do, and so it kind of earns that right, I think.
Yeah, but also, these are like I'd say these are extremely long chapters too.
Mm-hmm.
At least by modern standards.
Oh yeah, I agree. Yeah, I don't know if I've ever seen another book. I mean, I don't know. Maybe House of Leaves has some chapters that are like that long if you include the footnotes and all that.
Mhm.
But it would only be 1 or 2 chapters in the book of that length. Because like some of the
Yeah,
chapters you have like the parts like in the explorations where it's like, it takes 30, 40 pages to, go through a couple sentences.
yeah.
So, anyway, let's get back in. I'm going to take another sip of water first, though. You can never hydrate
So,
too much when you're reading.
you can belch in the middle of reading.
I've already done that like twice, so
I only noticed once.
fair enough. A great fire, banked high and red, flamed in the grate, and under the ivy-twined branches of the chandelier the Christmas table was spread. They had come home a little late, and still dinner was not ready, but it would be ready in a jiffy, his mother had said. They were waiting for the door to open and for the servants to come in, holding the big dishes covered with their heavy metal covers. Heavy metal covers?
Oh my god!
They're playing Metallica over there.
That reminds me of someone who satirically said that Finnegan's Wake predicted Twitter. There's like there's like a sequence in I think page 9 which arguably could be used to describe Twitter.
Huh. Well, I'll write that. That's interesting. Shout out to Mr. Joyce.
I mean, he's a nutcase.
No, he's normal. All were waiting. Uncle Charles, who sat far away in the shadow of the window, Dante and Mr. Casey, who sat in the easy chairs at either side of the hearth, Stephen, seated on a chair between them, his feet resting on the toasted boss. Mr. Dedalus looked at himself in the pier glass above the mantelpiece, waxed out his mustache ends, and then, parting his coat-tails, stood with his back to the glowing fire, and still from time to time he withdrew a hand from his coat-tail to wax out one of his mustache ends. Mr. Casey leaned his head to one side and, smiling, tapped the gland of his neck with his fingers. And Stephen smiled too, for he knew now that it was not true that Mr. Casey had a purse of silver in his throat. He smiled to think how the silvery noise which Mr. Casey used to make had deceived him. And when he had tried to open Mr. Casey's hand to see if the purse of silver was hidden there, he had seen that the fingers could not be straightened out, and Mr. Casey had told him that he had got those 3 cramped fingers making a birthday present for Queen Victoria. Well, you know how family friends are.
Yeah.
Mr. Casey tapped the gland of his neck and smiled at Stephen with sleepy eyes, and Mr. Dedalus said to him, "Yes. Well, now that's all right. Oh, we had a good walk, hadn't we, John? Yes. I wonder if there's any likelihood of dinner this evening. Yes. Oh, well, now, we've got a good breath of ozone round the head today. Aye, bedad." He turned to Dante and said, You didn't stir out at all, Mrs. Riordan?" Dante frowned and said shortly, "No." Mr. Dedalus dropped his coat-tails and went over to the sideboard. He brought forth a great stone jar of whiskey from the locker and filled the decanter slowly, bending now and then to see how much he had poured in. Then, replacing the jar in the locker, he poured a little of the whiskey into 2 glasses, added a little water, and came back with them to the fireplace. "A thimbleful, John," he said, "just to whet your appetite." Mr. Casey took the glass, drank, and placed it near him on the mantelpiece. Then he said, "Well, I can't help thinking of our friend Christopher manufacturing." He broke into a fit of laughter and coughing and added, "Manufacturing that champagne for those fellows." Mr. Dedalus laughed loudly. "Is it Christy?" he said. "There's more cunning in one of those warts on his bald head than in a pack of jackboxes." He inclined his head, closed his eyes, and licking his lips profusely, began to speak with the voice of the hotel keeper. And he has such a soft mouth when he's speaking to you, don't you know? He's very moist and watery about the dewlaps, God bless him. Mr. Casey was still struggling through his fit of coughing and laughter. Stephen, seeing and hearing the hotel keeper through his father's face and voice, laughed. Mr. Dedalus put up his eyeglass and, staring down at him, said quietly and kindly, "What are you laughing at, you little puppy, you?"
Oh my god.
The servants entered and placed the dishes on the table. Mrs. Dedalus followed, and the places were arranged. "Sit over," she said. Mr. Dedalus went to the end of the table and said, "Now, Mrs. Riordan, sit over. John, sit you down, my hearty." If some of these, it feels weird to say this with an American accent. But also, I know if I tried the accent, I'd sound horrific, so.
Ghastly.
He looked round to where Uncle Charles sat and said, "Now then, sir, there's a bird here waiting for you." "Oh, and I hope she's beautiful." Anyway. Probably not that kind of bird. When all had taken their seats, he laid his hand on the cover and then said quickly, withdrawing it, "Now, Stephen." Stephen stood up in his place to say the grace before meals. "Bless us, O Lord, and these thy gifts which through thy bounty we are about to receive through Christ our Lord. Amen." All blessed themselves, and Mr. Dedalus, with a sigh of pleasure, lifted from the dish the heavy cover, pearled around the edge with glistening drops. Stephen looked at the plump turkey which had lain, trussed and skewered on the kitchen table. He knew that his father had paid a guinea for it in Dunn's of D'Olier Street, and that the man had prodded it often at the breastbone to show how good it was. And he remembered that man's voice when he had said, "Take that one, sir. That's the real Ally Daly." Why did Mr. Barrett and Clongowes call his Pandybatto turkey? But Clongowes was far away, and the warm, heavy smell of turkey and ham and celery rose from the plates and dishes, and the great fire was banked high and red in the grate, and the green ivy and red holly made you feel so happy. And when dinner was ended, the big plum pudding would be carried in, studded with peeled almonds and sprigs of holly, with bluish fire running around it, and a little green flag flying from the top. It was his first Christmas dinner, and he thought of his little brothers and sisters who were waiting in the nursery, as he had often waited, till the pudding came. The deep low collar and the Eton jacket made him feel queer and oldish. And that morning, when his mother had brought him down to the parlor, dressed for Mass, his father had cried. That was because he was thinking of his own father, and Uncle Charles had said so too. Mr. Dedalus covered the dish and began to eat hungrily. Then he said, "Poor old Christy. He's nearly lopsided now with roguery." "Simon," said Mrs. Dedalus, "you haven't given Mrs. Riordan any sauce." Mr. Dedalus seized the sauce-boat. "Haven't I?" he cried. "Mrs. Riordan, pity the poor blind." Dante covered her plate with her hands and said, "No, thanks."
She's so not into this.
"Yeah." Mr. Dedalus turned to Uncle Charles. "How are you off, sir?" "Right as the mail, Simon. You, John? I'm all right. Go on yourself. Mary? Here, Stephen. Here's something to make your hair curl." He poured sauce freely over Stephen's plate and set the boat again on the table. Then he asked Uncle Charles, was it tender? Uncle Charles could not speak because his mouth was full, but he nodded that it was. "That was a good answer our friend made to the canon." "What?" said Mr. Dedalus. "I didn't think he had that much in him," said Mr. Casey. "I'll pay you your dues, father, when you cease turning the house of God into a polling booth." "A nice answer," said Dante, "for any man calling himself a Catholic to give to his priest."
Oh my god.
Yeah, I don't think you're supposed to talk to them like that. Now you have to go to confession about it. Anyway. "They have only themselves to blame," said Mr. Dedalus suavely. "If they took a fool's advice, they would confine their attention to religion." "It is religion," Dante said. "They are doing their duty in warning the people." "We go to the house of God," Mr. Casey said, "in all humility to pray to our Maker and not to hear election addresses." It is religion," Dante said again. "They are right. They must direct their flocks." "And preach politics from the altar, is it?" asked Mr. Dedalus. "Certainly," said Dante. "It is a question of public morality. A priest would not be a priest if he did not tell his flock what is right and what is wrong." Mrs. Dedalus laid down her knife and fork, saying, "For pity's sake, and for pity's sake, let us have no political discussion on this day of all days in the year."
Miss Dedalus is the true centrist, the enlightened centrist.
The enlightened centrist who doesn't want Christmas dinner politics argument. I guess your annoying fucking family at the dinner table is a time-honored tradition. They
It
won't
makes it
stop
special.
arguing.
That's the good part.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I just ripped this scene off in Act 1, Chapter 1.
For real. I mean, there's worse things to rip off, so good on you. See, really, the skill lies in knowing what to rip off. That's I think the.
That's a good point. It was transformative, but still.
I mean, yeah. I mean, everything good that is not straight up plagiarism is in hopefully in some degree transformative. Anyway.
Quite right, ma'am.
Yes, all days in the year. "Quite right, ma'am," said Uncle Charles. "Now, Simon, that's quite enough now. Not another word now." "Yes, yes," said Mr. Dedalus quickly. He uncovered the dish boldly and said, Now then, who's for more turkey? Nobody answered. Dante said, "Nice language for any Catholic to use." They immediately start up again. Oh, Mrs. Riordan, I appeal to you, said Mrs. Dedalus, to let the matter drop now. Dante turned on her and said, "And am I to sit here and listen to the pastors of my church being flouted?" "Nobody is saying a word against them," said Mr. Dedalus, "so long as they don't meddle in politics." "The bishops and priests of Ireland have spoken," said Dante, "and they must be obeyed." "Let them leave politics alone," said Mr. Casey, "or the people may leave their church alone." He's turning into a fucking Protestant.
Oh.
"You hear?" said Dante, turning to Mrs. Dedalus. "Mr. Casey, Simon," said Mrs. Dedalus, "let it end now." Too bad," said Uncle Charles. "What?" cried Mr. Dedalus. "Were we to desert him at the bidding of the English people?" "Oh, we're bringing the English into it now. It's getting heated."
The Anglicans can't hear about this.
Yeah. "He was no longer worthy to lead," said Dante. "He was a public sinner." "We are all sinners, and black sinners," said Mr. Casey coldly. "Woe be to the man by whom the scandal cometh," said Mrs. Riordan. "It would be better for him that a millstone were tied about his neck and that he were cast into the depth of the sea rather than that he should scandalize one of these, my least little ones. That is the language of the Holy Ghost." "And very bad language, if you ask me," said Mr. Dedalus coolly. "Simon, Simon," said Uncle Charles. "The boy." Yes, said Mr. Dedalus. I was thinking about the bad language of that railway porter. Well, now that's all right. Here, Stephen, show me your plate, old chap. Eat away now. Here.
Stephen's just dead silent.
Stephen's just like
know.
caught in the middle of this bullshit. Relatable.
This is great.
He heaped up the food on Stephen's plate and served Uncle Charles and Mr. Casey to large pieces of turkey and splashes of sauce. Mrs. Dedalus was eating little, and Dante sat with her hands in her lap. She was red in the face. Mr. Dedalus rooted with the carvers at the end of the dish and said, "There's a tasty bit here we call the Pope's nose. If any lady or gentleman—" He held up a piece of fowl up on the prong of the carving fork. Nobody spoke. He put it on his own plate, saying, "Well, you can't say but you were asked. I think I had better eat it myself, because I'm not well in my health lately." He winked at Stephen and, replacing the dish cover, began to eat again. There was a silence while he ate. Then he said, "Well now, the day kept up fine after all. There were plenty of strangers down, too." Nobody spoke. He said again, "I think there were more strangers down than last Christmas."
Oh.
He looked round at the others whose faces were bent towards their plates and, receiving no reply, waited for a moment and said bitterly, "Well, my Christmas dinner has been spoiled anyhow." He's like, "Well, I tried."
This is a great interaction. I love this so much.
This is a wonderful scene. This is the best scene so far. Oh, this is awesome. "There could be neither luck nor grace," Dante said, "in a house where there was no respect for the pastors of the church." Mr. Dedalus threw his knife and fork noisily on his plate. "Respect," he said. "Is it for Billy with the lip or for the tub of guts up in Armagh? Respect." "Princes of the church," said Mr. Casey with slow scorn. "Lord Lightram's coachman, yes," said Mr. Dedalus. "They are the Lord's anointed," Dante said. "They are an honor to their country." "Tub of guts," said Mr. Dedalus coarsely. "He has a handsome face, mind you, in repose. You should see that fellow lapping up his bacon and cabbage of a cold winter's day. Oh, Johnny." He twisted his features into a grimace sorry, am I reading that correctly?
That is bestiality.
Of heavy bestiality, and made a lapping noise with his lips. Oh, Lord.
This is such a great book.
I didn't want to say bestiality out loud until I'd read it over 3 times. Just to make sure that's what I was actually looking at.
Oh my god.
I've already had a few times in the book where I've misread a word and had to read it again. I wonder what my most egregious one is going to be. That's what I'm waiting on. I'm waiting on a really bad one at some point.
It's gotta happen, like, at least once.
Oh yeah, I mean it always does. That's how speaking is.
For sure, but it's funnier now that it's on tape.
Yeah, true. I can edit it out, but that's too much work, and I won't.
It's not worth it.
It's not worth it.
This is for the Fight Club 262 entertainment arc.
True.
We've become React content creators.
We are. We're reacting to the canon.
Like, yeah, the canon in like an extremely vague sense.
I mean, Joyce is part of the canon, I think. At this point.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, Western canon, sure.
Yeah.
I mean, he's one of the most important writers who's ever lived, but like, no, I'm just saying, like, I think it's really funny to refer to our little list and say this is the entire Western canon.
No, definitely not. But
It would be better for it if it was.
for true. That's the first time I've ever used the phrase "for true" like that. This book is affecting me. I'm already becoming like Irish.
This book will turn you in.
This book will turn you Irish. Forced irishification.
Oh my god. Oh my
I'd
god.
love to see it. All right, let's.
How did they survive the famine?
I don't know. They got food from somewhere.
They ate bread.
Bread. Really, Simon, said Mrs. Dedalus, you should not speak that way before Stephen. It's not right. Oh, he'll remember all this when he grows up, said Dante hotly. The language he heard against God and religion and priests in his own home.
Please, let it go!
Let him remember, too, cried Mr. Casey to her from across the table, the language with which the priests and the priests' pawns broke Parnell's heart and hounded him into his grave. Let him remember that, too, when he grows up. Sons of bitches, cried Mr. Dedalus.
Oh my god!
When he was down, they turned on him to betray him and rend him like rats in a sewer. Low-life dogs. And they look it. By Christ, they look it. They behaved rightly, cried Dante. They obeyed their bishops and their priests. Honor to them.
I love Stephen's dad so fucking much.
And they look it. By Christ, they look it. I need to start saying that. Whenever somebody pisses me off, I'm gonna be like, they're a low-life dog. And they look it.
By Christ.
He look. They look it. That's such a good line. Oh my god. There better be a fucking holy war over the Christmas dinner.
This is a cause for crusade.
Truly. Well, it is perfectly dreadful to say that not even for one day in the year, said Mrs. Dedalus, can we be free from these dreadful disputes. Uncle Charles raised his hands mildly and said, Come now. Can we not have our opinions, whatever they are, without this bad temper and this bad language? It is too bad, surely. Mrs. Dedalus spoke to Dante in a low voice, but Dante said loudly, I will not say nothing. I will defend my church and my religion when it is insulted and spit on by renegade Catholics. Mr. Casey pushed his plate rudely into the middle of the table, and, resting his elbows before him, said in a hoarse voice to his host, Tell me, did I tell you that story about a very famous spit? You did not, John, said Mr. Dedalus. Why then, said Mr. Casey, it is a most instructive story. It happened not long ago in the country Wicklow where we are now. He broke off and, turning towards Dante, said with quiet indignation, And I may tell you, ma'am, that I, if you mean me, am no renegade Catholic. I am a Catholic as my father was, and his father before him, and his father before him again when we gave up our lives rather than sell our faith. The more shame to you now, Dante said, to speak as you do. The story, John, said Mr. Dedalus, smiling. Let us have the story anyhow. Catholic indeed, repeated Dante ironically. The blackest Protestant in the land would not speak the language I have heard this evening. Mr. Daedalus began to sway his head to and fro, crooning like a country singer. I am no Protestant, I tell you again, said Mr. Casey, flushing. Mr. Daedalus, still crooning and swaying his head, began to sing in a grunting nasal tone. Oh, come all you Roman Catholics that never went to Mass. He took up his knife and fork again in a good humor and set to eating, saying to Mr. Casey, Let us have the story, John. It will help us to digest. Stephen looked with affection at Mr. Casey's face, which stared across the table over his joined hands. He liked to sit near him at the fire, looking up at his dark, fierce face, but his dark eyes were never fierce, and his slow voice was good to listen to. But why was he then against the priests? Because Dante must be right, then. But he had heard his father say that she was a spoiled nun, and that she had come out of the convent in the Alleghenies when her brother had got the money when her brother had got the money from the savages for the trinkets and the chainies. Perhaps that made her severe against Parnell, and she did not like him to play with Eileen because Eileen was a Protestant, and when she was young she knew children that used to play with Protestants, and the Protestants used to make fun of the litany of the Blessed Virgin. Tower of Ivory, they used to say, House of Gold. How could a woman be a tower of ivory or a house of gold? Who was right then? And he remembered the evening in the infirmary at Clongowes, the dark waters, the light at the pierhead, and the moan of sorrow from the people when they had heard. Eileen had long white hands. One evening when playing Tig, she had put her hands over his eyes, long and white and thin and cold and soft. That was ivory, a cold white thing. That was the meaning of Tower of Ivory. Yeah, you got it, buddy. The story is very short and sweet, Mr. Casey said. It was one day down in Arklow, a cold, bitter day, not long before the chief died. May God have mercy on him. He closed his eyes wearily and paused. Mr. Daedalus took a bone from his plate and tore some meat from it with his teeth, saying, Before he was killed, you mean? Mr. Casey opened his eyes, sighed, and went on. It was down in Arklow one day. We were down there at a meeting, and after the meeting was over, we had to make our way to the railway station through the crowd. Such booming and baaing, man, you never heard. They called us all the names in the world. Well, there was one old lady, and a drunken old harridan she was surely, that paid all her attention to me. She kept dancing along beside me in the mud, bawling and screaming into my face, Priest Hunter, the Paris Funds, Mr. Fox, Kitty O'Shea. And what did you do, John? Asked Mr. Daedalus. I let her bawl away, said Mr. Casey. It was a cold day, and to keep up my heart I had, saving your presence, ma'am, a quid of Tullamore in my mouth, and sure, I couldn't say a word in any case because my mouth was full of tobacco juice. Well, John? Well, I let her bawl away to her heart's content, Kitty O'Shea and the rest of it, till at last she called that lady a name that I won't sully this Christmas board, nor your ears, ma'am, nor my own lips by repeating. He paused. Mr. Daedalus, lifting his head from the bone, asked, And what did you do, John? Do, said Mr. Casey. She stuck her ugly old face up at me, and when she said it, and I had my mouth full of tobacco juice, I bent down to her, and puh, I says I to her like that. He turned aside and made the act of spitting. Puh, says I to her like that, right into her eye. He clapped a hand to his eye and gave a hoarse scream of pain. Oh, Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, says she. I'm blinded and drowned. He stopped in a fit of coughing and laughter, repeating, I'm blinded entirely.
This is insane.
Oh, God. Mr. Daedalus laughed loudly and lay back in his chair while Uncle Charles swayed his head to and fro. Dante looked terribly angry and repeated while they laughed, Very nice, ha, very nice. It was not nice of it to spit in the woman's eye, but what was the
Thank
name
you for letting us in on that, Joyce.
Yeah. What was the name the woman had called Kitty O'Shea that Mr. Casey would not repeat? He thought of Mr. Casey walking through the crowds of people and making speeches from a wagonette. That was what he had been in prison for, and he remembered that one night Sergeant O'Neill had come to the house and had stood in the hall, talking in a low voice with his father and chewing nervously at the chin strap of his cap. And that night Mr. Casey had not gone to Dublin by train, but a car had come to the door, and he had heard his father say something about the Cabinteely Road. He was for Ireland and Parnell, and so was he was for Ireland and Parnell, and so was his father, and so was Dante too. For one night at the band on the Esplanade, she had hit a gentleman on the head with her umbrella because he had taken off his hat when the band played "God Save the Queen" at the end.
Oh my god.
Yeah, tensions are tense. Thankfully, it's all better now. Mr. Dedalus gave a snort of contempt. "Ah, John," he said, "it is true for them. We are an unfortunate priest-ridden race, and always were, and always will be till the end of the chapter." Uncle Charles shook his head, saying, "A bad business, a bad business." Mr. Dedalus repeated, "A priest-ridden, God-forsaken race." He pointed to the portrait of his grandfather on the wall to his right. "Do you see that old chap up there, John?" he said. "He was a good Irishman who, when there was no money in the job, he was condemned to death as a white boy. But he had a saying about our clerical friends, that he would never let one of them put his 2 feet under his mahogany." Dante broke in angrily. "If we are a priest-ridden race, we ought to be proud of it. They are the apple of God's eye. Touch them not, says Christ, for they are the apple of my eye." "And can we not love our country, then?" asked Mr. Casey. "Are we not to follow the man that was born to lead us?" "A traitor to his country," replied Dante, "a traitor and adulterer. The priests were right to abandon him. The priests were always the true friends of Ireland." "Were they, Faith?" said Mr. Casey. He threw his fist on the table, and frowning angrily, protruded one finger after another. "Didn't the bishops of Ireland betray us in the time of the Union when Bishop Lanigan presented an address of loyalty to the Marquess Cornwallis? Didn't the bishops and priests sell the aspirations of their country in 1829 in return for Catholic emancipation? Didn't they denounce the Fenian movement from the pulpit and in the confession box? And didn't they dishonor the ashes of Terence Bellew McManus?" His face was glowing with anger, and Stephen felt the glow rise to his own cheek as the spoken words thrilled him. Mr. Dedalus uttered a guffaw of coarse scorn. "Oh, by God," he cried, "I forgot little old Paul Cullen. Another apple of God's eye." Dante bent across the table and cried to Mr. Casey, "Right, right! They were always right. God and morality and religion come first." Mrs. Dedalus, seeing her excitement, said to her, "Mrs. Riordan, don't excite yourself answering them." "God and religion before everything," Dante cried. "God and religion before the world." Mr. Casey raised his clenched fist and brought it down on the table with a crash. "Very well, then," he shouted hoarsely. "If it comes to that, no God for Ireland." "John! John!" cried Mr. Dedalus, seizing his guest by the coat sleeve. Dante stared across the table, her cheeks shaking. Mr. Casey struggled up from his chair and bent across the table towards her, scraping the air from before his eyes with one hand as though he were tearing aside a cobweb. "No God for Ireland," he cried. "We have had too much God in Ireland. Away with God!" "Blasphemer! Devil!" screamed Dante, starting to her feet and almost spitting in his face. Uncle Charles and Mr. Dedalus pulled Mr. Casey back into his chair again, talking to him from both sides reasonably. He stared before him out of his dark flaming eyes, repeating, "Away with God, I say." Dante shoved her chair violently aside and left the table, upsetting her napkin ring, which rolled slowly along the carpet and came to rest against the foot of an easy-chair. Mrs. Dedalus rose quickly and followed her towards the door. At the door, Dante turned round violently and shouted down the room, her cheeks flushed and quivering with rage, "Devil out of hell! We won! We crushed him to death! Fiend!" The doors slammed behind her. Mr. Casey, freeing his arms from his holders, suddenly bowed his head on his hands with a sob of pain. "Poor Parnell!" he cried loudly. "My dead king!" He sobbed loudly and bitterly. Stephen, raising his terror-stricken face, saw that his father's eyes were full of tears. Whew.
Incredible.
What a scene. My God.
That, yeah, it's incredible. I love it. It's a great scene. I think it's pretty much perfect.
Yeah, I mean, this is the kind of scene I'm going to be coming back to and rereading a lot because, I mean, yeah, it's just a perfect, like, depiction of how conflicts can escalate and people say shit.
Yeah.
People say shit they don't even really mean just to be rude.
Uh-huh. Well, surely you must have also found it somewhat relatable.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. I've been on all sides of this at different times.
I'm just saying, I don't know how, like, dinner with your family went when you were a teenager, but,
Usually everyone else was more unified. Yeah, I was the big disagreeer until I
yeah, no, that's
shut
what
the
I'm
fuck up
saying. It's
forever.
like,
So,
you're like the 13-year-old Ronnie with this, like, actually,
oh
you know,
yeah,
like,
absolutely, I would get into it.
that's great. That's really funny.
I would take every family dinner as an opportunity to talk about evolution.
I'm sure it pissed them off. Yeah.
At first, they just treated me really condescendingly, but as I got older, eventually it morphed into, yeah, we can't talk about this anymore, or we're gonna like legitimately damage our relationship.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And
Oh my
yeah, at a
god.
certain point, it went from being fun for me, both fun in the sense of disagreeing is fun, and also being right is fun, uh, to legitimately like having negative feelings about my own family members. You know what I mean?
Yeah, nobody wants to feel that way.
Mm-hmm.
It Yeah, this is basically how it went in my mind, but I know that's not literally how it went.
Mm-hmm. No, yeah, it would have been much less fiery, and there wouldn't have been cursing and throwing shit.
I can't believe I'm admitting to having invented 13-year-old atheist Ronnie family dinner fan fiction in my mind.
No, it's good. It's good. You can do that. You can make all the fucking fanfic you want about me. It's probably better than my actual life was, or at least more interesting.
This is it. This is it. This is what it was like. You just read it.
I mentioned it to somebody else. Maybe it was you. I don't know. I mentioned it somewhere, but I was like, if you want to understand like the in one image of like a thing that actually happened to me, you want to understand uh what it was like to be teenage Ronnie. Uh just imagine uh sitting behind the school next to your crush cuddling up with her boyfriend while you read Karl Marx's Capital. And that puts you, I think, into the like experience the of teenage Ronnie, and you could start to understand what was going on there.
Yeah.
You can peel back the layers of you know the loneliness and the pretension as a coping mechanism almost.
Yeah.
Yeah, fun stuff.
I see. I see.
That's
Wait.
teenage Ronnie for you.
I mean, yeah, I know that rationally, but like it becomes different in my mind. It's hard to put into words. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I knew you then in some fashion, but it still isn't registering the same way.
Right. I mean, that particular image that I described would have been from when I was 15 or 16. It would have been 16, yeah. So we'd probably interacted at some point, but we weren't like friends at that point.
Yeah.
Unfortunate. We should have been.
You should have been on Shatsu. No, you shouldn't. You shouldn't have been. I've said that before.
Yeah, you said that before, and I'm like, you're gonna wish that evil on me. My God. Yeah. Well,
Are you planning to stop there or?
um, I will probably not be reading more. If you would like to take over for the next section, uh,
Oh, okay, sure, I'm down.
then I'm good for that.
Okay. The
The fellows talked together in little groups. One fellow said, "They were caught near the Hill of Lions." "Who caught them?" "Mr. Gleason and the minister. They were on a car." The same fellow added, "A fellow in the higher line told me." Fleming asked, "But why did they run away? Tell us." "I know why," Cecil Thunder said. "'Cause they had fecked cash out of the rector's room." Who fecked it?" "Kickham's brother. And they all went shares in it." "But that was stealing. How could they have done that?" "A fat lot you know about it, Thunder," Wells said. "I know why they scut." "Tell us why." "I was told not to," Wells said. "Oh, go on, Wells," all said. "You might tell us. We won't let it out." Stephen bent forward, his head to hear. Wells looked round to see if anyone was coming. Then he said secretly, "You know the altar wine they keep in the press in the sacristy?" Sacristy, I don't know.
No.
"Yes." "Well, they drank that and was found out who did it by the smell. That's why they ran away, if you want to know." And the fellow who had spoken first said, "Yes, that's what I heard too from the fellow in the higher line." The fellows were all silent. Stephen stood among them, afraid to speak, listening. A faint sickness of awe made him feel weak. How could they have done that? He thought of the dark, silent sacristy. There were dark wooden presses there where the crimped surplices lay quietly folded. It was not the chapel, but still you had to speak under your breath. It was a holy place. He remembered the summer evening he had been there to be dressed as boat-bearer, the evening of the procession to the little altar in the wood. A strange and holy place. The boy that held the censer swung it gently to and fro near the door with the silvery cap lifted by the middle chain to keep the coals lighting. That was called charcoal, and it had burned quietly as the fellow had swung it gently and had given off a weak, sour smell. And then all were vested. He had stood holding out the boat to the rector, and the rector had put a spoonful of incense in it, and it had hissed on the red coals. The fellows were talking together in little groups here and there on the playground. The fellow seemed to have grown smaller. It's because the sprinter had blocked him down the day before. A fellow out of second of grammar. He had been thrown by the fellow's machine lightly on the cinder path, and his spectacles had been broken in 3 pieces, and some of the grit of the cinders had gone into his mouth. That was why the fellows seemed to him smaller and further away, and the goalposts so thin and far, and the soft gray sky so high up. But there was no play on the football grounds, for cricket was coming. And some said that Barnes would be prof, and some said it would be Flowers. And all over the playgrounds they were playing rounders and bowling twisters and lobs. And from here and from there came the sounds of the cricket bats through the soft gray air. They said pick, pack, pock, puck, little drops of water in a fountain slowly falling in the brimming bowl. Athie, who had been silent, said quietly, "You are all wrong." All turned toward him eagerly. "Why? Do you know? Who told you? Tell us, Athie." Athie pointed across the playground to where Simon Moonan was walking by himself, kicking a stone before him. "Ask him," he said. The fellows looked there and said, "Why him? Is he in it?" Athie lowered his voice and said, "Do you know why those fellows scut?" "I will tell you, but you must not let on you know." "Tell us, Athie." "Go on, you might if you know." He paused for a moment and then said mysteriously, "They were caught with Simon Moonan and Tusker Boyle in the square one night." The fellows looked at him and asked, "Caught? What doing?" Athie said, "Smugging." All the fellows were silent, and Athie said, "And that's why." "All right then."
Hmm.
Stephen looked at the faces of the fellows, but they were all looking across the playground. He wanted to ask somebody about it. What did that mean about the smuggling in the square? Why did the 5 fellows out of the higher line run away for that? It was a joke, he thought. Simon Moonan had nice clothes, and one night he had shown him a ball of creamy sweets that the fellows of the football 15 had rolled down to him along the carpet in the middle of the refectory when he was at the door. It was the night of the match up against the Bective Rangers, and the ball was made just like a red and green apple, only it opened it was full of the creamy sweets. And one day, Boyle had said that an elephant had 2 tuskers instead of 2 tusks. That was why he was called Tusker Boyle. But some fellows called him Lady Boyle because he was always at his nails paring them. That's quite queer.
Yeah, there's a lot of queer things taking place here now.
uh,
I'm a fan.
Eileen had long, thin, cool white hands because she was a girl. They were like ivory, only soft. That was the meaning of Tower of Ivory, but Protestants could not understand it and made fun of it. One day he had stood beside her looking into the hotel grounds. A waiter was running up a trail of bunting on the flagstaff, and a fox terrier was scampering to and fro on the sunny lawn. He had put her hand into his pocket, where his hand was, and he had felt how cool and thin and soft her hand was. This is so cute. I mean, I really can't stress how, charming it is to,
Yeah.
like, it is this obvious, like, first love figure.
Mhm. It's heartwarming.
Yeah, I quite enjoy it. She had said that pockets were funny things to have, and then all of a sudden she had broken away and had run laughing down the sloping curve of the path. Her fair hair had streamed out behind her like gold in the sun. Tower of Ivory, House of Gold. By thinking of things, you could understand them. But why in the square? You went there when you wanted to do something. It was all thick slabs of slate, and water trickled all day out of tiny pinholes, and there was a queer smell of still water in there. Behind the door of one of the closets there was a drawing in red pencil of a bearded man in a Roman dress with a brick in each hand, and underneath was the name of the drawing. Bulbous was building a wall. Some fellow had drawn it there for a cod. It had a funny face, but it was very like a man with a beard. And on the wall of another closet, there was written in backhand in beautiful writing, Julius Caesar wrote the Calico Belly. Perhaps that was why they were there, because it was a place where some fellows wrote things for cod. But all the same, it was queer what Alfie said, and the way he said it. It was not a cod because they had run away. He looked with the others across the playground, and began to feel afraid. At last Fleming said, "And we are all to be punished for what the other fellows did?" "I won't come back, see if I do," Cecil Thunder said. 3 days silence in the refectory and sending us up for 6 and 8 every minute. "Yes," said Wells. "And old Barrett has a new way of twisting the note so that you can't open it, and fold it again to see how many free-lay you get. You are to get. I won't come back too." "Yes," said Cecil Thunder, "and the prefect of studies was in second of grammar this morning." "Let us get up a rebellion," Fleming said. "Will we?" All the fellows were silent. The air was very silent, and you could hear the cricket bats, but more slowly than before. Pick. Pock. Wells asked, "What is going to be done to them?" "Simon, Moonen, and Tusker are going to be flogged," Athie said, "and the fellows in the higher line got their choice of flogging or being expelled." "And which are they taking?" asked the fellow who had spoken first. "All are taking expulsion except Corrigan," Athie answered. "He's going to be flogged by Mr. Gleason." "I know why," Cecil Thunder said. "He's right, and the other fellows are wrong, because the flogging wears off after a bit. But a fellow that has been expelled from college is known all his life on account of it. Besides, Gleason won't flog him hard." "It's best of his play not to," Fleming said. "I wouldn't like to be Simon, Noonan, and Tusker," Cecil Thunder said. "But I don't believe they will be flogged. Perhaps they will be sent up for twice 9. "Ah, no, no," said Athie. "They'll both get it on the vital spot." Wells rubbed on himself and said in a crying voice, "Please, sir, let me off." I like how I'm accidentally slipping into an Irish accent, and not even intentionally. It's very subtle though. Hold on a moment. Get something to drink here.
Mhm.
Dude, I think this is the longest part of the chapter. I'm not totally sure, but oh my god, what? Cheryl just sent me a link 3 times. No, twice.
Hmm.
The link is uglyretardedfaggots.com.
Okay.
I need
Good
to look
spit
at.
take. Goodbye, mom.
This is a real website. What is this? This is a real website. You better edit this into the video.
You want me to edit this into the video? I
I'm
don't want to
I'm
do.
sending an image.
I don't want to
I'm
do
sending an
video
image.
editing. Fuck.
I'm sending this image.
Is that what Cheryl sent?
No, it's she sent the link to it, and I went to the web page, and it's just this image. That's it. That's the only thing on the site.
All right. I'll probably put a link in the description. I don't want to edit this video. I just want to post it.
Okay, fair enough.
Link in the description for the funny image. Yes.com.
Yeah, I'm sure YouTube won't get me. At least not now.
Yeah,
Or get us, rather. That's what I should say.
right. We're safe. Also, there's it goes to page 62.
No, yeah, I'm just the version I'm looking at
For this.
is just like a single page.
I see. So for me, that's 17 more pages. We're on page 45.
It's just like I'm scrolling down through this gigantic block. Not it's formatted. It's not like
Right. It's just not split into
pages. Yeah,
pages. Yeah.
it's the version on Project Gutenberg. So
Right. Yeah, I mean, when did this book is this public domain? I don't know. Did it come out? When did it come out?
yeah, it came out in 1916. So
Okay, yeah, it's public domain. So
that also means, yeah, I just realized Ulysses is also public domain now.
true.
All right, I should stop being distracted. How long have we been going for?
An hour 50.
Yeah, not bad, not bad.
Yeah.
The fellows laughed, but he felt they were a little afraid. In the silence of the soft gray air, he heard the cricket bats from here and from there. Pock. That was a sound to hear, but if you were hit, then you would feel a pain. The pandy bat made a sound too, but not like that. The fellow said it was made of whalebone and with leather with lead inside. And he wondered what the pain was like. There were different kinds of sounds. A long, thin cane would have a high whistling sound, and he wondered what that pain was like. It made him shivery to think of it and cold, and with that he said too. But what was there to laugh at in it? It made him shivery. But that was because you always felt like a shiver when you let down your trousers. That was in the same bath when you undressed yourself. He wondered who had to let them down, the master or the boy himself. Oh, how could they laugh about it that way? He looked at Athie's rolled up sleeves and knuckly, inky hands. He'd rolled up his sleeves to show how Mr. Gleason would roll up his sleeves. But Mr. Gleason had round, shiny cuffs and clean white wrists and fattish white hands, and the nails of them were long and pointed. Perhaps he pared them too, like Lady Boyle. But they were terribly long and pointed nails, so long and cruel that they were though the white fattish hands were not cruel, but gentle. And though he trembled with cold and fright to think of the cruel long nails, and of the high whistling sound of the cane, and of the chill you felt at the end of your shirt when you undressed yourself, yet he felt a feeling of queer, quiet pleasure inside him to think of the white, fattish hands, clean and strong and gentle. Yeah, that's queer, all right. And he thought of what Cecil Thunder had said, that Mr. Gleason would not flog Corrigan hard. And Fleming had said he would not because it was best of his play not to. But that was not why. A voice from far out on the playground cried, "All in!" And other voices cried, "All in! All in!" During the writing lesson, he sat with his arms folded, listening to the slow scraping of the pens. Mr. Harford went to and fro, making little signs in red pencil, and sometimes sitting beside the boy to show him how to hold the pen. He had tried to spell out the headline for himself, though he knew already what it was for. It was the last of the book. Zeal without prudence is like a ship adrift. But the lines of the letters were like fine, invisible threads. It was only by closing his right eye tight and staring out of the left eye that he could make out the full curves of the capital. But Mr. Harford was very decent and never got into a wax. All the other masters got into dreadful waxes. But why were they to suffer for what fellows in the higher line did? Wells had said that they had drunk some of the altar wine out of the press of the sacristy, and that it had been found who had done it by the smell. Perhaps they'd stolen a monstrance to run away with and sell it somewhere. That must have been a terrible sin to go in there quietly at night, to open the dark press and steal the flashing gold thing into which God was put on the altar in the middle with flowers and candles at benediction, while the incense went up into the clouds at both sides as the fellows swung the censer and Dominic Kelly sang the first part of by himself in the choir. But God was not in it, of course, when they stole it. But still it was a strange and a great sin even to touch it. He thought of it with deep awe. Terrible and strange sin. It thrilled him to think of it in the silence when the pins scraped lightly. But to drink the altar wine out of the press and be found by the smell was a sin too. But it was not terrible and strange. It only made you feel a little sickish on account of the smell of the wine. Because on the day that he had made his first Holy Communion in the chapel, he had shut his eyes and opened his mouth and put out his tongue a little. And when the rector had stooped down to give him the Holy Communion, he had smelt a faint winey smell off the rector's breath after the wine of the Mass. The word was beautiful, wine. It made you think of dark purple because grapes were dark. Purple that grew in Greece outside houses like white temples. But the faint smell of the rector's breath had made him feel a sick feeling on the morning of his first communion. The day of your first communion was the happiest day of your life. And once a lot of generals had asked Napoleon what was the happiest day of his life, they thought he would say the day he won some great battle, or the day he was made an emperor. But he said, "Gentlemen, the happiest day of my life was the day on which I made my first Holy Communion." Father Arnal came in, and the Latin lesson began, and he remained still, sitting on the desk with his arms folded. Father Arnal gave out the theme books, and he said that they were scandalous, and that they were all to be written out again with the corrections at once. But the worst of all was Fleming's theme, because the pages were stuck together by a blot. And Father Arnold held it up by a corner and said it was an insult to any master to send him such a theme. Then he asked Jack Lawton to decline the noun mare, and Jack Lawton stopped at the ablative singular and could not go on with the plural. "You should be ashamed of yourself," said Father Arnold sternly. "You, the leader of the class." Then he asked the next boy, and the next, and the next. Nobody knew. Father Arnold became very quiet, more and more quiet, as each boy tried to answer it and could not. But suddenly his face was black-looking. His eyes were staring through, though his voice was so quiet. Then he asked Fleming, and Fleming said that the word had no plural. Father Arnold shut the book and shouted at him, "Kneel out there in the middle of the class. You are one of the idlest boys I ever met. Copy out your themes again, the rest of you." Fleming moved heavily out of his place and knelt between the last two benches. The other boys bent over their theme books and began to write. A silence filled the classroom, and Stephen, glancing timidly at Father Arnold's dark face, saw that it was a little red from the wax he was in. Was that a sin for Father Arnold to be in a wax, or was he allowed to get into a wax when the boys were idle, because that made them study better? Or was he only letting on to be in a wax? It was because he was allowed to be, because a priest would know what a sin was and would not do it. I love the very definitely not underhanded critique of
Oh
these
yeah.
priests.
No, for sure. Like the whole thing is like very much one of the major themes I've noticed in the book so far is like the like adults just making a terrible place for the kids that have to live there. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess that's just how schools were at the time in general.
Or you could read it as just Stephen being really self-centered and not thinking about anything other than himself. But I think that's a
I don't,
much shallower reading. I think.
and besides, I don't think that's the case either.
Right.
I think he hasn't reached the stage of psychological development yet, where who developed the like stages? Erickson,
I don't know.
where it's not like selfishness, but unawareness of other people. Like I feel like he's in that particular range of age where you know
Mm-hmm.
I'll look it up later so I can show you what I mean.
Right.
If I remember, I probably won't though, but it's okay. It's chill, so okay.
It chills, so okay.
How much we got left? There's still quite a lot left. Oh my god.
It's doable though.
Yeah, it's definitely doable. Um, but if he did it one time by mistake, what would he do to go to confession? Perhaps he would go to confession to the minister. And if the minister did it, he would go to the rector, and the rector to the provincial, and the provincial to the general of the Jesuits. That was called the order. And he had heard his father say that they were all clever men. They could all have become high up people in the world if they had not become Jesuits. And he wondered what Father Arnall and Paddy Barrett would have become, and what Mr. McGlade and Mr. Gleason would have become if they had not become Jesuits. It was hard to think what, because you would have to think of them in a different way, with different collared coats and trousers, and with beards and mustaches and different kinds of hats. I love I love Stephen so much.
He's kind of growing on me as like one of my favorite characters I've read recently.
in this very brief little window,
Yeah,
yeah.
and for the first 50 pages, yeah.
The door opened quietly and closed. A quick whisper ran through the class, the prefect of studies. There was an instant of dead silence and the loud crack of a pandy bat on the last desk. Stephen's heart leapt up in fear. Any boys want flogging here, Father Arnall? Cried the prefect of studies. Any lazy idle loafers that want flogging in this class? He came to the middle of the class and saw Fleming on his knees. Ho ho! He cried. Who is this boy? Why is he on his knees? What is your name, boy? Fleming, sir. Ho ho! Fleming. An idler, of course. I can see it by your eye. Why is he on his knees, Father Arnall? He wrote a bad Latin theme, Father Arnall said. He missed all his questions in grammar. Of course he did, cried the prefect of studies. Of course he did. A born idler. I can see it in the corner of his eye. He banged his pandy bat down on the desk and cried, Up, Fleming! Up, my boy! Fleming stood up slowly. Hold out! Cried the prefect of studies. Fleming held out his hand. The pandy bat came down on it with a loud smacking sound. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Other hand, the pandy bat came down again in 6 loud, quick smacks. Kneel down, cried the prefect of studies. Fleming knelt down, squeezing his hands under his armpits, his face contorted with pain. But Stephen knew how hard his hands were because Fleming was always rubbing rosin into them. But perhaps he was in great pain. It's resin, excuse me. Perhaps he was in great pain, for the noise of the pandy bat was terrible. Stephen's heart was beating and fluttering. At your work, all of you, shouted the prefect of studies. You want no lazy, idle loafers in here. Lazy, idle little schemers. At your work, I tell you. Father Dolan will be in to see you every day. Father Dolan will be in tomorrow. He poked one of the boys inside with his pandy bat, saying, You, boy, when will Father Dolan be in again? Tomorrow, sir, said Tom Furlong's voice. Tomorrow, and tomorrow, and tomorrow, said the prefect of studies. Make up your minds for that. Every day, Father Dolan, right away. You, boy, who are you? Stephen's heart jumped suddenly. Daedalus, sir. Why are you not writing like the others? My. He could not speak with fright. Why is he not writing, Father Arnall? He broke his glasses, said Father Arnall, and I exempted him from his work. Broke? What is this I hear? What is this? Your name is? Said the prefect of studies. Daedalus, sir. Out here, Daedalus. Lazy little schemer. I see schemer in your face. Where did you break your glasses? Stephen stumbled into the middle of the class, blinded by fear and haste. Where did you break your glasses? Repeated the prefect of studies. The cinder path, sir. Oh, the cinder path, cried the prefect of studies. I know that trick. Stephen lifted his eyes in wonder and saw for a moment Father Dolan's white-gray, not young face, his baldy white-gray head with fluff at the sides of it, the steel rims of his spectacles, and his no-collared eyes looking through the glasses. Why did he say he knew that trick? Lazy idle little loafer, cried the prefect of studies. Broke my glasses. An old schoolboy trick. Out with your hand this moment. Stephen closed his eyes and held out in the air, his trembling hand with the palm upwards. He felt the prefect of studies touch it for a moment at the fingers to straighten it, and then the swish of the sleeve of the soutane as the pandy bat was lifted to strike. A hot, burning, stinging, tingling blow like the loud crack of a broken stick made his trembling hand crumple together like a leaf in the fire. At the sound of the pain, scalding tears were driven into his eyes. His whole body was shaking with fright. His arm was quivering. It was shaking, and his crumpled, burning, livid hand shook like a loose leaf in the air. A cry sprang to his lips, a prayer to be let off. But though the tears scalded his eyes and his limbs quivered with pain and fright, he held back the hot tears, and the cry that scalded his throat. Other hand, shouted the prefect of studies. Stephen drew back his maimed and quivering right arm, and held out his left hand. The soutane's sweet sleeve swished again, as the pandy bat was lifted in a loud crashing sound, and a fierce, maddening, tingling, burning pain made his hand shrink together with the palms and fingers in a livid, quivering mass. The scalding water burst forth from his eyes, and, burning with shame and agony and fear, he drew back his shaking arm in terror, and burst out into a whine of pain. His body shook with a palsy of fright, and in shame and rage he felt the scalding cry come from his throat, and the scalding tears falling out of his eyes and down his flaming cheeks. "Kneel down," cried the prefect of studies. Stephen knelt down quickly, pressing his beaten hands to his sides. To think of them swollen and beaten and swollen with pain, all in a moment made him feel so sorry for them, as if they were not his own, but someone else's that he felt sorry for. And as he knelt, calming the last sobs in his throat, and feeling the burning, tingling pain pressed into his sides, he thought of the hands which he held out in the air, with the palms up, and of the firm touch of the prefect of studies, which he had steadied the shaking fingers, and of the beaten, swollen, reddened mass of palm and fingers that shook helplessly in the air. "Get at your work, all of you!" cried the prefect of studies from the door. "Father Dolan will be in every day to see if any boy, any lazy, idle little loafer wants flogging. Every day. Every day." Jesus Christ.
Wow.
that's
What a
that's like
fucking brutal scene. Jesus Christ.
this is like, even for the time, I think this would be seen as abusive.
Yeah, that's pretty gruesome. And yeah, I was cringing like the whole time through that. Jesus.
You, you didn't even check to verify it, man. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my. Yeah, I mean the even what's his face? Father Arnault said it was legitimate, or like at least implied that.
Yeah.
What the hell is wrong with this guy?
Probably a lot of things.
Yeah, yeah. Anyway, the door closed behind him. The hushed class continued to copy out the themes. Father Arnault rose from his seat and went among them, helping the boys with gentle word and telling them the mistakes they had made. His voice was very gentle and soft. Then he returned to his seat and said to Fleming and Stephen, "You may return to your places, you two." Fleming and Stephen rose and, walking to their seats, sat down. Stephen, scarlet with shame, opened a book quickly with one weak hand and bent down upon it, his face close to the page. It was unfair and cruel because the doctor had told him not to read without glasses, and had written home to his father that morning to send him a new pair. And Father Arnault had said that he need not study till the new glasses came. Then to be called a schemer before the class, and to be pandied when he always got the card for first or second, and was the leader of the Yorkists. How could the prefect of studies know that it was a trick? He felt the touch of the prefect's fingers as they had steadied his hand. At first he thought he was going to shake hands with him because of the fingers soft and firm. But then in an instant he heard the swish of the soutane sleeve and the crash. It was cruel and unfair in the middle of the class then. And Father Arnault had told them both that they might return to their places without making any difference between them. He listened to Father Arnault's low and gentle voice as he corrected the themes. Perhaps he was sorry now and wanted to be decent. But it was unfair and cruel. The prefect of studies was a priest, but that was cruel and unfair. And his white-gray face and the no-collared eyes behind the steel-rimmed spectacles were cruel-looking, because he had steadied the hand first with his firm, soft fingers, and that was to hit it better and louder. It's a stinking mean thing, that's what it is. said Fleming in the corridor as the classes were passing out in file to the refectory. To pandy a fellow for what is not his fault. You really broke your glasses by accident, didn't you? Nasty Roche asked. Stephen felt his heart filled by Fleming's words and did not answer. Of course he did, said Fleming. I wouldn't stand it. I'd go up to the rector and tell him. Tell the rector on him. Yes, said Cecil Thunder eagerly. And I saw him lift the pandy bat over his shoulder, and he's not allowed to do that. Yeah. It's not even like it. It's not even subtext that it's abuse. It's just outright.
Yeah, no, that's what's happening. Yeah.
Did they hurt you much? Nasty Roche asked. Very much, Stephen said. I wouldn't stand it, Fleming repeated, from Baldyhead or any other Baldyhead. It's a stinking mean, low trick, that's what it is. I'd go straight up to the rector and tell him about it after dinner. Yes, do. Yes, do, said Cecil Thunder. Yes, do, yes, go up and tell the rector on him, Daedalus, said Nasty Roche, because he said that he'd come in tomorrow and pandy you. Yes, tell the rector, all said. And there were some fellows out of second of grammar listening, and one of them said, the Senate and the Roman people declared that Daedalus had been wrongly punished. It was wrong, it was unfair and cruel. As he sat in the refectory, he suffered time after time in memory of the same humiliation until he began to wonder whether or not it might not really be there was something in his face which made him look like a schemer, and he wished he had the little Amir to see. But there could not be. It was unjust and cruel and unfair. He could not eat the blackish fish fritters they got on Wednesdays in Lent, and one of his potatoes had the mark of the spade in it. Yes, he would do what the fellows had told him. He would go up and tell the rector that he'd been wrongly punished. A thing like that had been done before by somebody in history, by some great person whose head was in the books of history. And the rector would declare he had been wrongly punished by the Senate, because the Senate and the Roman people always declared that the men who did that had been wrongly punished. Those were the great men whose names were in Richmald Magnall's Questions. History was all about those men and what they did. And that was what Peter Parley's tales about Greece and Rome were all about. Peter Parley himself was on the first page in a picture. There's a road over a heath with grass at the side, and little bushes, and Peter Parley had a broad hat like a Protestant minister, and a big stick, and he was walking fast along the road to Greece and Rome. It was easy what he had to do. All he had to do was, when the dinner was over and he came out in his turn to go on walking, but not out to the corridor, but up the staircase on the right that led to the castle. He had nothing to do but that, to turn to the right and walk fast up the staircase. And in half a minute he would be in the low, dark, narrow corridor that led through the castle to the rector's room. And every fellow had said that it was unfair, even the fellow out of second of grammar who had said that about the Senate and the Roman people. What would happen? He heard the fellows of the higher line stand up at the top of the refectory, and heard their steps as they came down the matting. Hattie Roth and Jimmy McGee, and Spaniard and the Portuguese, and the fifth was Big Corrigan, who was going to be flogged by Mr. Gleason. That was why the prefect of studies had called him a schemer and pandied him for nothing. And, straining his weak eyes, tired with the tears, he watched Big Corrigan's broad shoulders and his big hanging black head passing in the file. But he had done something, and besides Mr. Gleason would not flog him hard. He remembered how Big Corrigan looked in the bath. He had skinned the same collar as the turf-collared bog water in the shallow end of the bath, and when he walked along the side, his feet slapped loudly on the wet tiles, and at every step his thighs shook a little because he was fat. The refectory was half empty, and the fellows were still passing out in file. He could go up the staircase because there was never a priest or a prefect outside the refectory door. But he could not go. The rector would side with the prefect of studies and think it was a schoolboy trick. And then the prefect of studies would come in every day the same, only it would be worse because he would be dreadfully waxy, and any fellow going up to the rector about him. The fellows had told him to go, but they would not go him themselves. And they had forgotten all about it. No, it's best to forget all about it, and perhaps the prefect of studies had only said he would come in. No, it was best to hide out of the way, because when you were small and young, you could often escape that way. The fellows at his table stood up. He stood up and passed it out among them in the file. He had to decide. He was coming near the door. If he went on with the fellows, he could never go up to the rector because he could not leave the playground for that. And if he went, and was pandied all the same, All the fellows would make fun and talk about young Daedalus going up to the rector and tell on the prefect of studies. He was walking down along the matting, and he saw the door before him. It was impossible. He could not. He thought of the baldy head of the prefect of studies with the cruel, no-colored eyes looking at him, and he heard the voice of the prefect of studies, asking him twice what his name was. Why could he not remember the name when he was told the first time? Was he not listening the first time? Or was it to make fun of the name? The great men in the history have had names like that, and nobody made fun of them. It was his own name that he should have been made fun of if he wanted to make fun. Dolan. It was like the name of a woman who washed clothes. That's that's really weird. I like that. I don't know why I like that, but it's funny.
It's a funny image, yeah.
He'd reached the door and, turning quickly up to the right, walked up the stairs, and before he could make up his mind to come back, he'd entered the low, dark, narrow corridor that led to the castle. And as he crossed the threshold of the door of the corridor, he saw, without turning his head to look, that all the fellows were looking after him as they went filing by. He passed along the narrow, dark corridor, passing little doors that were the doors of the rooms of the community. He peered in front of him and right and left through the gloom, and thought that those must be portraits. It was dark and silent. His eyes were weak and tired with tears, so that he could not see. Excuse me. But he thought that they were the portraits of the saints, and great men of the order who were looking down on him silently as he passed. St. Ignatius Loyola, holding an open book and pointing to the words Ad Majorem Dei Gloriam on it. St. Francis Xavier, pointing to his chest. Lorenzo Ricci, with his beretta on his head like one of the prefects of the lines. The three patrons of holy youth, St. Stanislaus Kostka, St. Aloysius Gonzago, and Blessed John Birchmans, all with young faces because they died when they were young, and Father Peter Kenny sitting in a chair wrapped in a big cloak. He came out on the landing above the entrance hall and looked about him. That was where Hamilton Rowan had passed, and the marks of the soldiers' slugs were there. And it was there that the old servants had seen the ghost in the white cloak of a marshal. An old servant was sweeping at the end of the landing. He asked him where was the rector's room, and the old servant pointed to the door at the far end, and looked after him as he went to it and knocked. There was no answer. He knocked again more loudly, and his heart jumped when he heard a muffled voice say, "Come in." He turned the handle and opened the door, and fumbled for the handle of the green baize door inside. He found it and pushed it open and went in. He saw the rector sitting at a desk writing. There was a skull on the desk, and a strange, solemn smell in the room, like the old leather of chairs. His heart was beating fast on account of the solemn place he was in, and the silence of the room, and he looked at the skull in the rector's kind-looking face. "Well, my little man," said the rector, "what is it?" Stephen swallowed down the thing in his throat and said, "I broke my glasses, sir." The rector opened his mouth and said, "Oh!" Then he smiled and said, "Well, if we broke our glasses, we must write home for a new pair." "I wrote home, sir," said Stephen, "and father and all said I'm not to study till they come." "Quite right," said the rector. Stephen swallowed down the thing again and tried to keep his legs and his voice from shaking. "But, sir—" "Yes? Father Dolan came in today and pandied me because I was not writing my theme." The rector looked at him in silence, and he could feel the blood rising to his face and the tears about to rise to his eyes. The rector said, "Your name is Daedalus, isn't it?" "Yes, sir." "And where did you break your glasses?" "On the cinder path, sir. A fellow was coming out of the bicycle house, and I fell and they got broken. I don't know the fellow's name." The rector looked at him again in silence. Then he smiled and said, "Oh, well, it was a mistake. I'm sure Father Dolan did not know." "But I told him I broke them, sir, and he pandied me." "Did you tell him that you'd written home for a new pair?" the rector asked. "No, sir." "Oh, well then," said the rector, "Father Dolan did not understand. You can say that I excuse you from your lessons for a few days." Stephen said quickly for fear his trembling would prevent him. "Yes, sir, but Father Dolan said he would come in tomorrow to pandy me again for it." "Oh, very well," the rector said. "It is a mistake, and I shall speak to Father Dolan myself. Will that do now?" Stephen felt the tears wetting his eyes and murmured, "Oh, yes, sir, thanks." The rector held his hand across the side of the desk where the skull was, and Stephen, placing his hand in it for a moment, felt a cool, moist palm. "Good day now," said the rector, withdrawing his hand and bowing. "Good day, sir," said Stephen. He bowed and walked quickly out of the room, closing the doors carefully and slowly. When he had passed the old servant on the landing and was again in the low, narrow, dark corridor, he began to walk faster and faster. Faster and faster he hurried on through the gloom excitedly. He bumped his elbow against the door at the end and, hurrying down the staircase, walked quickly through the 2 corridors and out into the air. He could hear the cries of the fellows on the playgrounds. He broke into a run, running quicker and quicker, ran across the cinder path and reached the third line of playground, panting. The fellows had seen him running. They closed round him in a ring, pushing one against another to hear. Tell us! Tell us! What did he say? Did you go in? What did he say? Tell us! Tell us!" He told him what he had said, and what the rector had said, and when he had told them, all the fellows flung their caps spinning up into the air and cried, "Hurroo!" They caught all their caps and sent them up again and spinning sky high, and cried again, "Hurroo! Hurroo!" They made a cradle of their locked hands and hoisted him up among them and carried him along until he struggled to get free. And when he had escaped from them, they broke away in all directions, flinging their caps again into the air and whistling as they went, spinning up and crying, "Hurroo!" And they gave 3 groans for Baldy Head Dolan and 3 cheers for Conmee, and said he was the decentest rector that was ever in Clongowes. The cheers died away in the soft gray air. He was alone. He was happy and free, but he would not be any way proud with Father Dolan. He'd be very quiet and obedient, and he wished that he could do something kind for him to show him that he was not proud. The air was soft and gray, and mild, and evening was coming. There was the smelling of evening in the air, and the smell of the fields in the country where they digged up turnips to peel them and eat them, and they went out for a walk to Major Barton's. The smell there was in the little wood beyond the pavilion where the gallnuts were. The fellows were practicing long shies and bowling lobs and slow twisters. In the soft gray silence you could hear the bump of the walls. From here and from there, through the quiet air, the sound of the cricket bats. Pick, pack, pock, puck. Like drops of water in a fountain, falling softly in the brimming bowl.
Awesome.
Yeah, that was great.
Yeah. I don't know if you I don't know if maybe I'm onto something here, but I noticed that there's like a little kind of a parallel, but like with that whole situation where Stephen, excuse me, is like questioning whether or not he wants to tell the rector about what Father Dolan did to him,
Yeah.
and to me that like rang as a much more serious version of earlier when he was like what's the right answer about like is it okay to my mom to kiss me at night. I don't
Yeah,
know.
no,
It reminded me of that, and it's like there's like the part of being a child is like having to navigate all of these fucking paradoxes of like what am I supposed to do? Like I know what I'm supposed to do, but like what am I supposed to do? You know what I mean?
yeah. It's no, that was definitely intentional. There's
And
no way it wasn't.
yeah, and I mean so far this has captured like that the kind of the paradoxes of childhood as I kind of put it there. It's captured them very well, and I'm very happy with the book. This is phenomenal.
Yeah, it's great stuff. We're
It's
only a
peak has
fifth of the
been
way through.
served.
Only a fifth of the way through. Yeah, and to think this is the weakest of the trilogy.
And that's all uphill from here. Yeah, no, I'm enjoying the hell out of this. I want to keep going, but it's getting late, so
I also have to, I have things to do tomorrow,
yeah.
today.
As do
So,
I. I have work in the morning, and yeah, so
yeah.
if you
I mean, I'm glad to have shared this chapter with you.
yeah, this was awesome. I can't wait to do the next one. Fuck yeah.
Awesome.
I'm really glad.
Yeah, me too. There's no one else I would want to show Joyce for the first time. Well, there are other people, but it's you're a person who's particularly receptive and attentive to these sorts of things.
Mhm.
So it's more rewarding when you're like engaging with it in that sort of way.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I kind of pride myself on that a little bit, and I certainly try to, because I know that these texts are like massively important, and there is a lot working in them, and so I try to like actively like pull that apart. Obviously, you can't do that all in one reading, but uh,
Yeah.
yeah, this is awesome.
I mean, yeah, I've read this. I haven't read it that much, but it is something. I mean, it is a book that, especially with Dubliners and this portrait, uh,
Shouldn't
they're a lot more accessible.
sorry.
It Sorry, what were you gonna say?
Sorry, I was gonna say shouldn't it be Dubliners? Like it's people from the city of Dublin. That's what I would imagine, but I don't know. I don't know anything about the.
I've heard it pronounced both ways.
Okay, fair enough.
Like specifically the title of the book. I've heard it called Dubliners and Dubliners.
Interesting. All right.
Um,
Sorry, what were you saying?
but yeah, these two, Portrait and Dubliners, are a lot more accessible, I'd say, and but
Mm-hmm.
they're still just as textured as any like the later stuff, I'd say. I don't think they're at nearly as complex as the later works, but they don't fuck around when they say that Joyce will pack like 12 different things into little bunches. These are like literary puzzles in a way.
Oh yeah. There's a lot of like moments where like individually it's almost palindromic. Like you can see like the same sentence being repeated, but it's not mere repetition. Like it's a sentence will have like three components to it, and then when it gets repeated, they'll be reversed or something like that. I've seen that a few
Yeah.
times, and it's really interesting to see, and yeah, that's the sort of thing that I can't really dwell too much on a first reading. So I do look forward to reading it again after I finish and going over those little moments, kind of on my own with like a
Yeah.
maybe a pen, and I don't mark up my books very much. I should do it more, I think, because
Hmm.
that'd be good for some things, I think.
Yeah. Don't worry. With Ulysses and the Wake, you'll basically objectively need a guide to get through them. So
Yay. be my be
I don't know. You
my
you could
be
read
my
you could read
Virgil to
Ulysses.
my Dante.
Sure, why not? I mean, you could read Ulysses without a guide, but it's going to be
A rough first
extremely
reading.
difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would be rough. It would definitely be rough.
I mean, I've encountered books like that before. I'm a Hegel fan, so I've gone into some books that you really can't understand very well the first time through.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, he did like popularize the stream of consciousness with the last sequence of Ulysses. He didn't make it, but like he's the guy who really capitalized on that style and put it into out for the world to see. It's this just 4,000 word long sentence that ends the book.
Hmm. That's
It's
awesome.
it's beautiful. It's very moving and like I can't like I look back at like contemporary reviews of Ulysses from back then, which shockingly people were very mixed about it because and I hear people who like echo the same thoughts nowadays,
Hmm.
where people are either absolutely in love with it and see that it's revolutionary, or they're like, yeah, this is technically excellent, but there's no like beating heart in the middle of it, which
Mm,
I don't. I disagree quite heavily with that.
right.
And that ending sequence is basically like proof of that to me. It's it ends so it's mesmerizing. It's dreamlike. It's almost like it's a gateway into the wake later in a way.
Interesting. I can't wait to get
But
to it. Yeah, one thing at a time.
Yeah. Don't worry. You like Stephen a lot. He comes back in Ulysses.
Nice.
He's like
We
he's
love
not
cameos. Or is he major character? Or is he cameo?
he's a major character, but not the main character.
Right. What's the guy's name? Bloom.
Yeah, Leopold Bloom.
Yeah, Leopold Bloom. Yeah. I remembered Bloom. I don't know why.
God, I can't wait for you to react. I mean, it's gonna be a while before we get there, but
Yeah.
I cannot wait to see your reaction to Ulysses and The Wake, but like especially The Wake.
Right. For sure. Yeah. I don't even own that one yet. I have Ulysses and I have obviously Portrait, but I don't have that one yet. So I'll have to pick that up when we get down to it.
Nightmare. It will ruin your life.
I mean, there's a lot of books on my bookshelf that have ruined people's lives. So
I mean,
I'm in favor of it.
yeah, yeah. I really cannot wait. It is so like absurdly like comical and strange. It's kind of almost nauseating to read.
Well, fair enough. This
Um,
wasn't nauseating though. This was a joy to read. I mean,
yeah, I mean this is very accessible
yeah.
and like it's uh it's almost relaxing, I'd say.
Yeah.
I mean
I mean, obviously there
it's
are
not
intense
like
scenes, but
yeah, it's you really you can get like a faint clue of what's to come later with his releases, his works.
right.
Uh it's just I think this is yeah, like I hear a lot of people say this is also their favorite Joyce, which makes sense. It's reasonably comfortable. It's not absurdly challenging.
Mhm.
It's a little challenging, but you know, not too much.
Right.
Anyway, I should probably like get to bed, and you also need to go
Fair enough.
too.
Yeah. I'll probably try to get the video online by tonight, but I don't know.
Okay, cool. How long have we been going?
2 hours, 32 minutes, and 9 seconds.
So true.
Yeah, good first
Um,
session, I think.
yeah, okay.
Enjoy your podcast, everybody. Well, you already did, because it's over.
Yeah.
But
Okay,
enjoy
all right.
it
Talk to
backwards.
you later.
There you go. Bye.